This is the complete story of Chrono Trigger, told in full across time itself. A journey of friendship and sacrifice, of ancient evils and future devastation, where magic rises from darkness and courage is forged in the fires of impossible odds. Our journey begins not in the comfortable present, but in an age so ancient that humanity itself exists only as scattered tribes struggling for survival against forces far beyond their comprehension. 65 million years before the events that will consume our heroes, the world is a savage place dominated by two intelligent species locked in perpetual conflict. The humans, primitive and vulnerable, cling to existence in small villages hidden among dense forests and rugged mountains. They possess no technology, no written language, no grand civilizations. What they do have is an indomitable will to survive and a fierce determination to carve out their place in this hostile world. Standing against them are the reptites, an advanced species of humanoid dinosaurs who view these upstart mammals as nothing more than nuisances, obstacles to be swept aside as they consolidate their dominance over the planet. The reptites possess sophisticated technology, organized military structures, and the intellectual capacity to build great fortresses and weapons of war. In this age, they are the superior species in every measurable way, and they know it. Their leader, Azala, commands from the imposing Tyranno lair, a massive structure perched atop a mountain, from which the reptites plan the final extinction of these troublesome apes who dare to resist their rightful rule. Among the humans, one figure stands out as a beacon of hope and defiance. Isla, the chief of Ioka village, embodies the raw strength and untamed spirit of her people. She is a warrior without equal in this primitive age, possessed of physical might that allows her to face down monsters and reptiles alike with her bare hands. Her blonde hair and simple furs mark her as a child of this brutal era, but her eyes sparkle with an intelligence and determination that hint at humanity's future potential. Ayla leads her people not through birthright or political maneuvering, but through sheer force of will and the respect earned through countless battles. When she speaks, others listen. When she fights, enemies fall. She is in many ways the perfect embodiment of what humanity must become to survive in this age of giants and monsters. The conflict between humans and reptites reaches its crescendo when visitors from an impossible future arrive in this ancient past, seeking a rare mineral called Dreamstone that will help them forge a legendary weapon. These strangers, appearing through shimmering portals of light that tear holes in reality itself, befriend Isla and involve themselves in the ongoing struggle. What follows is a desperate race to the Tyranno lair, where Isla and her new companions confront Azala in a final battle to determine which species will inherit the future. But as the battle reaches its peak, Azala does something unexpected. The reptile leader stops fighting and simply looks up at the sky with an expression of resigned acceptance. There, descending from the heavens like a red star, burning through the atmosphere, comes something that neither species anticipated, something that will rewrite the destiny of the entire planet. Azala speaks then, words heavy with the weight of prophecy. The reptiles, for all their superior technology and evolved civilization, are about to be swept away by a force of nature that cares nothing for advancement or intelligence. The strong will fall, and the weak will somehow, impossibly, survive. The entity crashes into the Tyranno lair with the force of 10,000 explosions, an impact so violent that it sends shockwaves around the entire world. Mountains crumble, forests ignite. The very sky turns black with debris and ash hurled into the upper atmosphere. In an instant, The Tyranno layer is obliterated, pushed deep beneath the surface by the sheer kinetic energy of the impact. The reptiles, caught at ground zero of this catastrophe, are effectively wiped out as a species. Their superior civilization, their advanced technology, their evolutionary advantages, all of it means nothing against the blind physics of a massive object traveling at cosmic velocities. As the dust begins to settle and the surviving creatures emerge from whatever shelter they could find, Isla names the entity. In the simple language of her people, where words carry direct, uncomplicated meanings, she combines the Iokan word for fire with the word for big. Lavos, big fire. It is a name that will echo across millennia, spoken in whispers of fear and awe by countless generations, who will never truly understand what slumbers beneath their feet. Lavos is no mere meteor. It is not a random chunk of space debris that happened to intersect with this planet's orbit. Lavos is a being, an entity with purpose and terrible design. From the moment of impact, it begins burrowing deeper into the planet's crust, seeking the molten core where it can tap directly into the world's life energy. There, hidden from sight and protected by miles of rock and earth, Lavos begins a process that will span millions of years. It feeds on the planet's energy, growing stronger with each passing century. It absorbs the DNA of every living creature on the surface, collecting genetic information like a cosmic library, storing samples of countless life forms in its vast biological database. More than just feeding, Lavos influences. Its mere presence begins altering the evolutionary trajectory of life on this planet. From its body radiates a strange energy, a force that will one day be called magic. Around 3 million years before the Common Era, pieces of Lavos that broke off during its descent or burrowing process will be discovered by primitive humans, and contact with these fragments will initiate a genetic transformation that eventually evolves into humanity's ability to use magic. This energy seeps through layers of rock over millions of years, permeating the world itself, subtly altering the fundamental nature of reality. Creatures born in ages to come will find themselves capable of manipulating fire and ice, of channeling lightning and shadow, of performing feats that seem to defy natural law. What they will not understand is that their magical abilities stem from Lavos' influence on human evolution, that every spell cast draws ultimately on energies the entity radiates. The impact crater becomes a sacred site for the humans who survive. They avoid it, sensing something fundamentally wrong about that place, where the earth was torn open and then sealed again. Strange phenomena occur near the impact site. Time itself seems malleable there, creating rifts and distortions that will, in the far future, allow travel between different eras. The crater is a wound in reality that never quite heals, a scar that marks where Lavos entered this world and changed everything forever. As centuries pass into millennia, the memory of Lavos' arrival fades from human consciousness. The survivors' descendants forget the specifics of that terrible day, though fragments persist in oral traditions and half-remembered legends. Stories of a fire from the sky, of a judgment that fell upon the old world and cleared the way for the new. The reptiles become myths, remembered as dragons and monsters in campfire tales told to frighten children. Ayla's name is forgotten, though her strength and courage echo through her lineage, her blood mingling with countless others as humanity spreads across the recovering world. Deep beneath the surface, Lavos continues its patient work. It has no concept of years or decades or centuries. It exists in a timeless state, simultaneously experiencing all moments of its plan at once. It knows that one day, when it has absorbed enough energy, When it has collected sufficient genetic material, when the harvest is finally ripe, it will emerge. It will burst forth from its cocoon of stone and fire, destroying everything on the surface in an apocalyptic display of power. And from its body will come offspring, new Lavos spawn, that will take the accumulated DNA of this world and carry it to other planets, repeating the cycle across the cosmos. This is Lavos' nature, its purpose, perhaps its only purpose. It is not evil in any conventional sense, any more than a virus is evil for replicating. It simply is, and its existence demands the eventual death of worlds. The stage is set now, though no one living in this primitive age could possibly comprehend it. The clock is ticking toward an apocalypse that will occur millions of years in the future, toward an event that will reshape the destiny of this entire world. But before that ending comes, there will be a golden age, unlike any the world has seen before or since. A civilization that will touch the very heavens themselves and pay a terrible price for their hubris. Fast forward now through countless generations, through the long, slow climb of human civilization from scattered tribes to organized kingdoms. Skip past ages of war and peace, of empires rising and falling, of technological advancement achieved through sweat and sacrifice. Jump forward to 12,000 years before the Common Era, to an age known as antiquity, though those who live in it simply call it the present. This is an era of wonders that future ages will mistake for mythology, a time when humanity touches powers that should perhaps have remained forever beyond their grasp. In this age, the world has split into two distinct classes of people, divided not by wealth or birthright, but by capability itself. There are the enlightened ones, humans born with the ability to manipulate the strange energy called magic, to bend reality through will and proper technique. These gifted individuals can conjure fire and ice, can heal wounds with a touch, can levitate objects and see across great distances. They are the elite, the chosen, the ones who have risen above the limitations of normal humanity. And then there are the earthbound ones, ordinary humans who possess no magical ability, who must rely on mundane tools and physical labor to accomplish what the enlightened do with a gesture and a word. The enlightened ones have constructed something unprecedented in human history, a kingdom that literally floats in the sky. Zeal, they call it, a name that speaks to their passionate pursuit of knowledge and power. The kingdom consists of several islands suspended thousands of feet above the frozen surface world, held aloft through the constant application of magical energy. These floating continents are home to magnificent architecture, buildings of smooth stone and shining crystal that seem to grow organically from the very islands themselves. Towers spiral toward the heavens, their peaks disappearing into clouds. Gardens of impossible beauty bloom in the thin air, maintained by magic that creates microclimates of eternal spring, despite the ice age raging below. The citizens of Zeal live lives of leisure and intellectual pursuit. They study the nature of magic itself, conduct experiments in temporal mechanics, debate philosophy and mathematics in great halls of learning. They create wonders seemingly for the joy of creation itself, self-playing musical instruments, books that update their contents with new knowledge, constructs of pure light that serve as guides and assistants. This is a golden age of human achievement, a civilization that has exceeded every limitation that once bound humanity to the cold earth. The enlightened ones walk through their floating paradise and congratulate themselves on their superiority, on their right to rule, on their transcendence of base humanity. But this paradise has a dark foundation that its inhabitants choose not to examine too closely. The earthbound ones, those humans without magical ability, have been banished from the floating islands. They live on the frozen surface in conditions of desperate poverty, huddling in caves and struggling to survive in the perpetual winter that grips the world. The enlightened justify this arrangement with comfortable lies. The earthbound are lazy, unambitious, perhaps even subhuman in some fundamental way. They lack magic because they lack the intelligence or spiritual purity required to wield it. Let them scrape out their existence below, while their betters build wonders above. This is the natural order, the way things must be. Ruling over this stratified society sits Queen Zeal, a woman who once possessed wisdom and compassion, but has been slowly corrupted by prolonged exposure to the very power that defines her kingdom. She wears robes of deep purple trimmed with gold, and her eyes burn with an intensity that hints at the megalomania growing within her. Queen Zeal is not satisfied with mere floating islands and magical wonders. She wants more, always more. She wants to unlock the ultimate secrets of magic itself. She wants to achieve immortality, to become something more than human, to transcend even the heights her civilization has already reached. To accomplish this ambition, Queen Zeal has turned her attention to the source of all magical energy in this world, Lavos. Somehow, through methods lost to history, the enlightened ones discovered the sleeping entity deep beneath the planet's surface. They detected the massive energy signature it radiates, the raw power flowing constantly from its hibernating form. To Queen Zeal, this discovery represented opportunity beyond measure. If they could tap directly into Lavos's energy, if they could build a device to channel and harness that power, they would have access to energy levels that dwarf anything they currently command. They could accomplish feats of magic that previous generations would have dismissed as impossible. They could, perhaps, achieve true godhood. To this end, Queen Zeal commanded her 3 most brilliant advisors, known as the Gurus, to construct a device called the Mammon Machine. These 3 men represent the pinnacle of Zeal's intellectual achievement. Melchior, the Guru of Life, possesses unmatched skill in the creation of magical artifacts and tools. Gaspar, the Guru of Time, understands the flow of chronology and the manipulation of temporal forces better than anyone alive. Balthazar, the Guru of Reason, bridges magic and technology, creating mechanical devices enhanced with mystical properties that push the boundaries of what either discipline could achieve alone. The 3 gurus construct the Mammon Machine with great reluctance and growing dread. They understand better than anyone the risks involved in attempting to channel Lavos's power. This is not merely energy they are dealing with, but something far more dangerous. Lavos is a conscious entity, an alien intelligence with its own agenda. To connect directly to its power is to invite its influence into their civilization. But Queen Zeal will not be dissuaded, and the gurus, despite their misgivings, carry out her commands. The resulting device is a twisted wonder of crystalline structures and arcane geometries, a machine that seems to exist partially outside normal space, pulsing with energies that make the air itself shimmer and crack. The only person capable of safely operating the Mammon Machine is the Queen's daughter, Princess Shala. She is a young woman of extraordinary magical ability, perhaps the most naturally gifted individual in Zeal's history. Her long blue hair flows like water, and her violet eyes hold depths of compassion that seem increasingly rare in this society of arrogant enlightened. Shala possesses a special pendant, created by the gurus, that allows her to interface with the Mammon Machine without being destroyed by its power. This pendant becomes both her greatest tool and her heaviest burden, for it makes her indispensable to her mother's increasingly dangerous experiments. Marle is gentle where her mother is harsh, empathetic where the queen is cold. She treats the earthbound ones with respect, visiting their settlements and speaking to them as equals, actions that scandalize the rest of Zeal's elite. She is also the primary caretaker for her younger brother, Janus, a quiet and brooding boy with pale skin and purple hair, who displays even greater magical potential than his sister, but refuses to use his powers. Janus has a pet cat named Alphador, and together they represent the only genuine friendship in his isolated life. Janus is sensitive to things others cannot perceive. He speaks sometimes of feeling the black wind, a spiritual disturbance that precedes death and disaster. His sister understands these premonitions, feels them too in her own way, and she gives him an amulet containing her prayers for his protection. Their conversations reveal a profound truth. They both know their mother has changed, has become something other than the woman who once raised them with love. Queen Zeal is no longer truly their mother, merely wearing her shape like an ill-fitting garment. The Mammon machine has corrupted her, its connection to Lavos allowing the sleeping entity's influence to seep into her mind and heart, twisting her natural ambitions into obsessive megalomania. The three gurus watch this corruption with growing horror, and finally move to oppose the Queen's plans. They argue that the Mammon machine is too dangerous, that drawing more power from Lavos risks waking the entity before its time. They plead with Queen Zeal to shut down the device, to step back from this precipice before it is too late. But the Queen, drunk on power and visions of immortality, refuses. She goes further, declaring her intention to move the Mammon machine to a new location beneath the ocean, to construct a grand ocean palace where she can access even greater amounts of Lavos's energy without interference or restraint. The gurus realize they must act, must somehow sabotage the Mammon machine or remove it from the Queen's control. But before they can organize effective resistance, disaster strikes. During the initial activation of the Ocean Palace's systems, something goes catastrophically wrong. The Mammon machine begins drawing too much power, creating an uncontrolled cascade that threatens to wake Lavos immediately. A dimensional vortex opens, space and time itself tearing under the strain of energies never meant to be channeled by mortal devices. The three gurus are caught in this temporal storm and scattered across history like leaves in a hurricane. Melchior is thrown forward to the year 1000, arriving in a time period 10,000 years beyond his birth. Gaspar is hurled to a place outside time entirely, a dimensional nexus called the End of Time, where all eras connect and overlap. Balthazar lands in the distant future, 2,300 years after the Common Era, in a world devastated by Lavos's emergence and left in ruins. Each guru finds himself trapped in an unfamiliar age, separated from their home and everyone they knew, bearing knowledge of what went wrong, but powerless to prevent it. Young Janus is also caught in the vortex. He is ripped from his sister's desperate grasp and thrown backward through time to the year 600, materializing in a completely different era with no way to return home. His amulet, containing Marle's prayers, is the only thing that accompanies him through the temporal storm. When he arrives in this strange medieval world, he is found by a species called mystics, intelligent creatures who worship magic and despise humanity. They take in the pale, powerful child and raise him as one of their own, never suspecting that this quiet boy will one day become their greatest leader and most terrible curse. Back in the Ocean Palace, Charla witnesses the catastrophe with tears streaming down her face. Her brother is gone, torn away to an unknown fate. Her mentors, the three gurus who showed her kindness and wisdom, have disappeared into the time stream. Her mother stands before the Mammon machine, channeling its power with a manic grin, seemingly oblivious to the destruction her ambition has caused. The Ocean Palace incident is not the end, merely a warning of what is to come. The kingdom of Zeal continues its dangerous dance with forces beyond its comprehension, drawing ever closer to an apocalypse that will erase it from history. But before that final catastrophe arrives, there will be visitors from the future, travelers through time who will bear witness to Zeal's glory and horror. They will see the floating islands and marvel at their beauty. They will meet Charla and be moved by her kindness. They will confront Queen Zeal and recoil from her madness. And ultimately, they will be present at the Ocean Palace when the worst finally happens, when the Mammon machine draws too much power and Lavos stirs in its ancient sleep, opening one terrible eye to regard the civilization that dared to disturb its slumber. 10,000 years after the fall of Zeal, 12,000 years after Lavos's arrival, humanity has rebuilt itself once more into something resembling civilization. The knowledge of magic has faded into myth and legend, dismissed by most as superstition. The floating islands are forgotten. Zeal itself remembered only in vague fairy tales about kingdoms in the sky. Humanity lives now in a medieval world of kingdoms and castles, of swords and knights, of simple technology and simpler lives. It is an age of relative peace, though wars between nations still flare up periodically. The world is not paradise, but neither is it the frozen wasteland of the Ice Age or the stratified dystopia of ancient Zeal. In the kingdom of Guardia, a small nation nestled between forested hills and gentle rivers, a festival is about to begin. It is the year 1000 of the Common Era, though those who live in this time know nothing of the ages that came before, or the catastrophe that awaits in their future. The Millennial Fair is a celebration marking 1,000 years since the kingdom's founding, and the entire capital city of Truce has transformed itself for the occasion. Colourful tents fill the town square, merchants call out their wares, musicians play cheerful melodies on flutes and drums. Children run between the stalls shrieking with laughter. Adults sample festival foods and gather in groups to gossip and enjoy the rare holiday. This is a day for joy, for forgetting troubles and simply living in the moment. In a modest house on the edge of Truce lives a young man named Crono. He has brilliant red hair that sticks up in rebellious spikes, a fashion choice that his mother insists makes him look wild and unkempt, though Crono has long since stopped caring about such matters. He dresses simply in a green shirt and blue tunic, clothes suitable for festival attendance, but nothing fancy, and around his neck he wears an orange bandana that belonged to his father. The katana leaning against his bedroom wall suggests martial training, though Crono is no soldier or mercenary. He is simply an ordinary young man, living an ordinary life in a peaceful kingdom, blessed with decent sword skills, but no great ambitions beyond perhaps attending the fair and seeing what excitement the day might bring. His mother wakes him with cheerful insistence, reminding him that the fair has already begun, and all his friends will be there without him if he continues to laze about. Crono stumbles out of bed, grabs a quick breakfast, and heads out into the festival day with no particular plan in mind. He wanders through the fairgrounds, taking in the spectacle and energy of the celebration. He watches street performers juggle and dance, considers trying the various games of chance, contemplates whether he should enter the foot race or sword fighting tournament. It is all wonderfully mundane, the sort of innocent fun that seems to exist outside of history's greater currents. Then he collides with a young woman, both of them turning a corner at the same moment and meeting with startling force. Crono manages to keep his feet, but the girl falls, her possessions scattering across the cobblestones. She has blonde hair held back by a simple band, green eyes that sparkle with energy and curiosity, and she wears a casual dress of pink and white that immediately marks her as not belonging to any particular class or station. As Crono helps her up and returns her pendant, a piece of jewelry that catches the light in unusual ways, she introduces herself as Marle and asks if he knows anything about the fair. There is something immediately engaging about her, a natural friendliness and enthusiasm that draws Crono in despite his normal reticence around strangers. When he offers to show her around the fairgrounds, she accepts with genuine delight, and they spend the next several hours exploring the festival together. They eat strange food from foreign vendors, try various games and attractions, watch demonstrations of magic tricks and feats of strength. Marle proves to be spirited and adventurous, dragging Crono toward anything that looks interesting or fun, laughing at their failures when games prove harder than expected, delighting in the simple pleasure of a perfect festival day with a new friend. Eventually, their wandering brings them to the north end of the fairgrounds, where a significant crowd has gathered around a platform displaying some sort of scientific demonstration. Two large metal pods sit on opposite sides of the stage, connected by thick cables to a complex arrangement of equipment that hums with barely contained energy. Standing beside this apparatus is a young woman with purple hair tied back in a practical ponytail, wearing goggles and a mechanic's outfit that is thoroughly out of place at a medieval fair. This is Lucca, brilliant inventor and Crono's childhood friend, and she is about to demonstrate her latest creation to a crowd that is equal parts curious and skeptical. Lucca's father Taban assists with the demonstration, explaining to the crowd that what they are about to witness is matter transportation, the instant relocation of a physical object from one location to another without passing through the space between. The fairgoers are polite but dubious. Most assume this is some sort of magic trick, a clever illusion rather than genuine science. When Lucca asks for a volunteer to test the device, the crowd suddenly becomes very interested in examining their shoes or studying the clouds overhead. No one wants to be the fool who steps into a charlatan's contraption and is embarrassed when the trick fails. Crono, recognizing his friend's need for support, steps forward. He is not entirely sure he believes in this teleportation device, but Lucca has been working on it for months, and she deserves at least one person willing to trust her genius. He steps onto one platform. Lucca activates the device, and in a flash of light and strange tingling sensation, Crono finds himself standing on the other platform, having instantly crossed the distance without walking. The crowd erupts in astonished applause, suddenly believers in this miraculous demonstration of science that looks indistinguishable from magic. Marle, caught up in the excitement and eager to experience this wonder herself, rushes forward and asks to try. Lucca, riding high on the successful demonstration, agrees enthusiastically. Marle steps onto the platform. Taban activates the teleporter, and everything goes catastrophically wrong. The pendant Marle wears begins to glow with an intense light, its interaction with the teleporter's energy field creating unexpected resonance. Instead of simply transporting her to the other pod, the device tears open something that should not exist, a hole in time itself, a swirling vortex of light and energy that pulls Marle through and swallows her whole. before anyone can react. The crowd panics and scatters, convinced they have just witnessed a terrible accident, perhaps even a death. The teleporter sparks and smokes, clearly overloaded by whatever just occurred. Lucca stares at her creation in shock, unable to comprehend what went wrong. Crono, without conscious thought or plan, grabs Marle's pendant from where it fell and steps onto the teleporter platform. He demands that Lucca activate it again, that she recreate whatever happened and send him after Marle. Lucca, terrified but understanding that there is no other option, powers up the device one more time. The portal reopens, that impossible tear in reality, and Crono leaps through without hesitation, disappearing into light and chaos while the crowd watches in stunned silence. When the disorientation fades and Crono's vision clears, he finds himself standing in a forest, but something is wrong. The trees are different species, arranged in patterns that do not match the forests around Truce. The air feels different too, carrying unfamiliar scents and temperatures. He stumbles forward until he emerges into a clearing and sees a castle in the distance, but it is not Guardia Castle as he knows it. The banners are different, the architecture slightly altered, everything just wrong enough to trigger a creeping sense of dislocation. He makes his way toward the castle, thinking Marle must have gone there for help, and along the way, he meets panicked soldiers speaking of their queen being found after her kidnapping. They seem excited and relieved, and they direct Crono toward the castle, where apparently a grand celebration is being organized. When he finally finds Marle inside the castle, she is dressed in royal finery, and everyone is treating her as Queen Lean, the beloved ruler of Guardia. Marle herself seems confused and uncertain, trying to play along while clearly not understanding what is happening. Then, impossibly, Marle begins to fade. Her image becomes transparent, ghostly, and within moments she has vanished entirely, erased from existence as if she never was. Crono stands alone in the castle room, bewildered and frightened, when Lucca arrives through another time portal, having followed them using a device she calls a gate key that can manipulate these temporal rifts. She takes one look at the situation and immediately understands what has happened. They have not traveled through space but through time, arriving in the year 600, 4 centuries in the past. The woman everyone thinks is Queen Lean is actually Marle, Princess Nadia of Guardia, in the year 1000, and her presence here has created a paradox. Lucca explains the situation with the clarity of someone who has spent years studying theoretical physics. Queen Lean is Marle's ancestor, a distant grandmother many generations removed. In the original timeline, Queen Lean was kidnapped and then rescued, allowing her to live and have children, who eventually had children who eventually produced Marle. But with Marle appearing in the past and being mistaken for the queen, everyone stopped searching for the real Lean. If Queen Lean is not rescued, if she dies in captivity, she will never have descendants, and Marle will retroactively cease to exist. The paradox has already begun to manifest, reality trying to reconcile the contradiction by erasing Marle from the timeline. There is only one solution. Find Queen Lean, rescue her before it is too late, and restore the proper flow of history. Crono and Lucca set off immediately, following rumours and clues that lead them to Minoria Cathedral, a religious building that has supposedly been giving shelter to the Queen. But when they arrive and begin investigating, they discover that the nuns who run the cathedral are not human at all. They are mystics, intelligent creatures who resemble demons and monsters, and they have been holding Queen Lean prisoner while disguised as her caretakers. a battle erupts in the cathedral's halls, Crono's sword meeting demonic claws, while Lucca provides support with a bizarre gun that shoots flames and lightning. They fight their way deeper into the building, past illusions and traps, until they confront the mystic leader who orchestrated this kidnapping. The situation seems hopeless. They are outnumbered and outmatched, when suddenly a new figure enters the fray. He appears to be a large frog, standing upright like a man, wearing a cape and carrying a broadsword nearly as tall as he is. This impossible creature leaps into battle with expert precision, his blade flashing as he cuts down mystics with the skill of a trained knight. After the battle, the frog introduces himself simply as Frog, speaking with an archaic manner that seems to belong to some long-lost age of chivalry. He explains that he has been tracking the mystics who took Queen Lean, acting in her defense out of old loyalty and duty. Together, the three of them free the real queen, return her to the castle, and watch as reality stabilizes. Somewhere in the future, Marle winks back into existence, the paradox resolved and the timeline restored. Crono and Lucca return to their own time using Lucca's gate key, emerging back at the fairgrounds as if they had never left, though for them, hours have passed, while here, only moments ticked by. Lucca heads home to work on understanding what happened and how to control these temporal gates, while Crono agrees to escort Marle back to Guardia Castle. As they walk through the familiar streets of Truce, Marle finally reveals her true identity. She is Princess Nadia, daughter of King Guardia the 21st, and she ran away from the castle to attend the fair because she was tired of the restrictions and expectations of royal life. She wanted one day of freedom, one chance to be a normal girl without guards and protocols and endless lessons in deportment and diplomacy. She apologizes for deceiving him, but Crono simply smiles and tells her that names do not matter, that she is the same person regardless of titles. They arrive at the castle gates, and the mood shifts from casual friendship to something more formal, as royal guards recognize the princess and usher her inside with urgent concern over her safety. Crono turns to leave, assuming his role in this adventure has concluded, when guard suddenly seize him on the king's orders. He is accused of kidnapping the princess, of spiriting her away from the fair through some unknown means. The charges are absurd, contradicted by Marle's increasingly frantic protests, but the king will not listen to his daughter's pleas. The court has made its decision, and Crono finds himself on trial for a crime he did not commit. The trial itself is a farce, a predetermined conclusion dressed up in legal ritual. The Chancellor presents evidence and testimony, much of it distorted or fabricated, painting Crono as a manipulative villain who enchanted the princess through trickery and magic. Witnesses who saw him at the fair testify about his actions, but their words are twisted to suggest sinister intent behind innocent gestures. Did he help the girl when she fell? Or did he deliberately trip her to steal her pendant? Did he volunteer for Lucca's experiment? Or did he scheme to create the accident that allowed him to kidnap Princess Nadia? The truth becomes irrelevant in the face of a justice system more interested in finding a scapegoat than discovering facts. The verdict arrives with crushing inevitability. Guilty. The sentence pronounced is death by execution, to be carried out in 3 days' time. Crono is dragged to the dungeon beneath the castle, thrown into a cell of cold stone and iron bars, left to contemplate his fate, while outside the medieval machinery of state-sanctioned murder slowly grinds into motion. But Crono is not friendless or forgotten. That night, Lucca arrives at the castle through means that blend ingenuity and deception, navigating the corridors until she reaches the dungeon. Behind her comes Marle. Having escaped her own room through palace passages she has known since childhood, determined to free the friend being punished for her choices. They spring Crono from his cell, and together the three of them fight their way out of the castle in a desperate running battle. Guards pour from every doorway, summoned by alarm bells that clang through the stone hallways. Crono's sword meets spear and shield. Lucca's guns bark fire and force guards back. Marle reveals surprising competence with a crossbow and healing magic that keeps them fighting despite accumulating wounds. They burst through the castle's outer gate just as it begins to lower, sliding beneath the descending portcullis with seconds to spare. But their escape route is blocked by royal knights in full armor, led by an officer who demands their surrender. The confrontation seems destined for bloodshed when suddenly the ground opens beneath their feet. Another time gate, appearing unbidden in this moment of crisis, swallows all three travelers and spits them out into an era none of them could have anticipated. When the disorientation passes and they look around, they find themselves standing on cracked pavement in the ruins of a city, surrounded by twisted metal and shattered concrete, beneath a sky that glows with a sickly red light. This is not the past. This is the future, and it is a vision of absolute horror. The year is 2300, 13 centuries beyond the time Crono, Marle, and Lucca call home. They stand in what was once a thriving metropolis, but now exists only as a tomb of concrete and twisted steel. Buildings lean at impossible angles, their upper floors sheared away by some unimaginable force. The streets are carpeted with ash and debris, and strange, mutated creatures lurk in the shadows. Things that might have once been animals, but have been transformed into aggressive monstrosities. The sky itself seems wrong, tinted red and orange by constant fires burning on the horizon, and the air carries the acrid taste of smoke and radiation. As they explore this nightmare landscape, they find scattered survivors, humans who have somehow endured in this devastated world. These people live in desperate conditions, huddling in the ruins of what were once proud structures, scavenging for food and clean water, fighting off the mutants that grow bolder with each passing day. The survivors speak of the day of Lavos, the moment when everything ended, when fire fell from the sky and the world died screaming. They mark time from that apocalyptic event, measuring their lives in years after Lavos, as if nothing that came before the catastrophe matters anymore. The travelers learn the terrible truth through fragments of conversation and old recordings found in abandoned facilities. In the year 1999, a creature emerged from deep beneath the Earth's surface. Lavos, that entity which crashed into the planet millions of years ago, finally completed its long gestation and erupted forth in an explosion of power that dwarfed every weapon humanity had ever created. The emergence lasted only a single day, but in that brief span, Lavos destroyed most of civilization. Cities were vaporized by energy beams that fell from the sky like rain. Forests burned, oceans boiled. The atmosphere itself was poisoned by the release of strange radiations that corrupted everything they touched. Humanity's military forces, armed with weapons that would have seemed like magic to people of the medieval era, threw everything they had at Lavos. Missiles, bombs, energy weapons, biological agents, every tool of destruction accumulated over centuries of advancement was deployed in desperate hope of stopping this apocalypse. Nothing worked. Lavos shrugged off humanity's mightiest weapons, as if they were nothing more than annoying insects buzzing around something vast and terrible. When the creature finally retreated back into the earth, Satisfied that its work was done, it left behind a world reduced to ashes and ruins, with only scattered pockets of survivors clinging to existence in the wasteland. In the centuries since that day, those survivors and their descendants have built a grim parody of civilization in the ruins. The dome settlements, scattered across the devastated landscape, house the last remnants of humanity. Each dome is a self-contained survival unit, equipped with food production systems that barely provide subsistence rations, water recyclers that turn grey sludge into something approaching drinkability, and power generators that might fail at any moment after 300 years of constant operation. The people in these domes exist rather than live, their days consumed by the desperate struggle for survival, their nights haunted by the knowledge that they are watching humanity's final chapter slowly wind toward its inevitable conclusion. Crono, Marle, and Lucca explore multiple dome settlements, each revealing new aspects of this nightmare future. In one dome, they find the director, a man who has hoarded food and resources while his neighbors starve, enforcing his tyranny through armed guards. In another, they discover old recordings left by scientists who tried to understand Lavos, who studied the creature even as it destroyed their world, leaving behind data that describes its life cycle and purpose. These ancient parasites travel through space, crashing into inhabited worlds, burrowing deep to feed on the planet's energy, while simultaneously absorbing genetic information from all life forms. When they emerge after millions of years, they spawn offspring that carry the accumulated DNA of an entire world, then send those spawn out to repeat the cycle on other planets. It is an existence strategy of cosmic scale, and Earth was simply the latest in what might be an infinite chain of consumed worlds. As they traverse the wasteland between domes, following directions given by survivors, they encounter a strange facility that has somehow remained operational despite the centuries. Inside this laboratory, they discover a robot, humanoid in design but clearly mechanical, with blue armor and yellow highlights. The robot sits motionless in a storage chamber, deactivated for hundreds of years, covered in dust but structurally intact. Lucca, unable to resist the challenge, examines its systems and discovers it is a sophisticated artificial intelligence created before the apocalypse. She manages to restore power to its core systems, and the robot awakens with a cheerful innocence that seems grotesque against the backdrop of devastation outside. The robot identifies itself with a serial number, but when Lucca asks if it has a name, it admits it was never given one, merely referred to by function and designation. Lucca, with characteristic spontaneity, christens it Robo, and the newly named artificial person joins their group with enthusiasm. Robo possesses knowledge of the pre-apocalypse world, memories of cities that thrived, and people who laughed without fear of tomorrow. Its perspective on the catastrophe is unique, viewing the destruction with sorrow, but without the emotional devastation that crushes human survivors. It can mourn what was lost while still maintaining hope for what might be rebuilt, and that resilience proves infectious to the time travelers. Through Robo's assistance and information gathered from various dome settlements, they discover the location of a hidden facility called the Lab 16 complex. This structure, buried deep underground and sealed away from the surface devastation, contains research data and equipment that might help them understand Lavos better. The journey to Lab 16 takes them through the most dangerous parts of the wasteland, where mutants have grown bold and aggressive, but they fight their way through with determination born of desperate need for answers. Inside Lab 16, they find something that changes everything. The facility's main computer system contains detailed records of Lavos's emergence, including precise timestamps and locations. But more importantly, it holds recordings of the moments before the catastrophe, security footage showing the creature beginning its emergence, and scientific projections about when and how the event would occur. Armed with this information, Lucca makes a realization that splits open their entire understanding of what they have been doing. They have not simply been stumbling through time randomly. They have been given an opportunity, perhaps the only opportunity, to prevent this future from ever occurring. If they can find a way to destroy Lavos before it emerges in 1999, if they can kill the creature while it still sleeps beneath the earth, then this entire timeline, this devastated future, will be erased. The people currently suffering in dome settlements will instead live normal lives in thriving cities. The billions who died on the day of Lavos will simply continue their existence, unaware that they were ever destined for extinction. It will be as if none of this horror ever happened, because it will not happen. The future changed before it can arrive. The implications are staggering. They are not merely witnesses to time, but potential architects of history. Their actions could literally reshape the world, could save billions of lives that will not exist if events continue on their current trajectory. But such power comes with equally immense responsibility and danger. Changing the past, or rather preventing the future, might have consequences they cannot predict. Paradoxes might tear reality apart. They might accidentally make things worse instead of better. The weight of these possibilities presses down on all of them, even as they know they have no real choice. Having seen this future, having walked through the ashes of civilization, they cannot simply return home and allow it to happen. Their discussion is interrupted by another presence in Lab 16, someone who has been waiting for them. In a sealed chamber deep within the facility, they discover an old man wearing strange clothing that seems to flicker between moments, as if he exists slightly out of phase with normal time. He introduces himself as Gaspar, the guru of time, and explains that he has been expecting them. He was thrown into a place called the End of Time when Zeal fell, a dimensional nexus that exists outside the normal flow of history. From that vantage point, he can observe all eras simultaneously, watching the branching possibilities of cause and effect. He has seen their journey through time, has watched them stumble into this quest, and he has been preparing for this meeting. Gaspar explains the mechanics of time travel with a clarity that even Lucca, for all her genius, had not fully grasped. The gates that have been appearing are not random, but connected to Lavos' influence. The creature's presence has weakened the barriers between eras, creating pathways that link different time periods. These gates will allow them to travel throughout history, but they must be careful. Actions in the past ripple forward, changing the present and future in ways both subtle and profound. He provides them with a device he calls the gate key, properly calibrated and enhanced, that will allow them to access these temporal portals at will, rather than stumbling through them by accident. But Gaspar offers something more valuable than technology: guidance and purpose. He tells them that if they truly want to prevent Lavos' emergence, they will need to become stronger, to gather allies from across time, and to understand the full scope of what they face. Lavos is not merely a creature, but a force of nature, possessing power that dwarfs anything they currently command. Defeating it will require weapons of legendary status, magic of ancient potency, and courage that does not waver even in the face of certain doom. He also warns them about the consequences of failure. If they confront Lavos before they are ready, if they challenge it without sufficient preparation, they will simply die, and the future will remain unchanged. There is no room for half measures or premature heroics. They must be methodical, must gather every advantage, must prepare as thoroughly as humanly possible before attempting to rewrite destiny itself. The three travelers, now joined by Robo, make their vow in that ruined laboratory, surrounded by the evidence of humanity's extinction. They will not allow this future to exist. They will travel through time, gathering power and allies, learning about Lavos and its nature, and ultimately they will destroy it before the day of Lavos can arrive. It is an impossible quest, the sort of thing that belongs in legends rather than reality, but they have no choice. Having seen the ashes of the future, they must become the fire that prevents those ashes from ever existing. Their quest to prevent the apocalypse takes them back to the year 600, that medieval era they first glimpsed during their desperate rescue of Queen Lean. But this time, they arrive with purpose and information, seeking not to fix paradoxes, but to find allies and weapons that might help in their ultimate confrontation with Lavos. The Middle Ages is an era defined by warfare between humans and mystics, those intelligent creatures that resemble demons and monsters. For decades, conflict has raged across the continent, with neither side able to achieve decisive victory. The human forces are led by Guardia Kingdom, the same nation that will exist 400 years later, though much of its territory is currently contested by mystic armies. The mystics, in turn, are commanded by a mysterious figure known simply as Magus, a powerful magic user whose abilities seem to transcend normal human capabilities. His mere presence on the battlefield can turn the tide of entire engagements, his magic laying waste to companies of soldiers with casual brutality. The humans fear him, as they might fear a demon prince, an embodiment of evil that exists only to bring suffering and death to humanity. Among Guardia's defenders is the figure the travelers met briefly during their first visit, Frog. This unusual knight has earned respect through deeds rather than appearance, proving himself through countless battles against mystic forces. He operates from a modest home near the coast, living in voluntary isolation due to his appearance and the memories that haunt him. When Crono and his companions seek him out, hoping to recruit him to their cause, Frog initially resists. He has his own war to fight, his own demons to confront, and he sees no reason to involve himself in what sounds like the ravings of madmen talking about time travel and apocalypses. But Frog's story is intimately tied to Magus, and that connection will ultimately draw him into the larger conflict against Lavos. His tale begins years ago, when he was not a frog at all, but a human boy named Glenn. He lived a simple life in the countryside, practicing swordplay with his best friend Cyrus, dreaming of one day becoming a knight in service to Guardia. Cyrus was everything Glenn aspired to be: brave, strong, noble, possessed of natural talent that made difficult sword work seem effortless. Where Glenn was uncertain and often afraid, Cyrus radiated confidence and courage. The two of them were inseparable, brothers in all but blood, united by dreams of heroism and glory. Cyrus achieved those dreams first, becoming a knight of the square table, Guardia's elite order of defenders. He wielded the legendary Masamun, a sword forged centuries earlier with magic and craft that made it virtually indestructible. The blade sang in Cyrus's hands, an extension of his will, and with it he became Guardia's finest warrior. Glenn followed his friend into knightly service, taking the oath and earning his tabard, but he always felt like a lesser shadow beside Cyrus's brilliance. Still, they fought together, protected the kingdom together, and Glenn was content to support his friend, even if he could never match him. Then came the mission that destroyed everything. Magus had been spotted near the ruins of the Denadoro Mountains, and Cyrus insisted they pursue him despite the obvious danger. Glenn accompanied him out of loyalty, but fear gnawed at his gut, a premonition of disaster that he could not shake. When they finally confronted Magus in those desolate heights, Glenn's fears proved prophetic. The warlock was beyond anything they had trained to face, wielding magic that warped reality itself. Cyrus fought bravely, the Masamune flashing in a desperate dance of offense and defense. But Magus simply laughed at his efforts. With a gesture and a word, Magus shattered the Masamune, the legendary blade breaking like common glass under the force of his spell. Cyrus fell moments later, struck down by magic that burned and froze simultaneously, dying before he hit the ground. Glenn, paralyzed by terror, could only watch as his best friend was murdered in front of him. Then Magus turned his attention to the surviving knight, this pathetic creature who had been too afraid to help his companion. Rather than kill Glenn cleanly, Magus decided to punish his cowardice with transformation. Dark magic wrapped around Glenn like chains, rewriting his form, reshaping his body into something that matched the weakness of his spirit. When the spell completed, Glenn had become a large frog, walking upright but otherwise fully transformed into an amphibian. Magus departed, leaving him alive specifically so he could live with the shame of his failure, a physical reminder of cowardice that he could never escape. The transformation was permanent, irreversible by any magic Glenn could access. He returned to Guardia and attempted to continue serving as a knight, but the looks of horror and pity from former comrades drove him away. He took the name Frog, accepting it as penance, and retreated to his isolated home where he brooded on revenge and regret. When Crono's group finds him, Frog is a creature defined by his past trauma, unable to move forward while the memory of Cyrus's death and his own failure consumes him. But Lucca brings information that changes everything. She has discovered that the Masamune was not destroyed, but merely broken, and the pieces can be reforged. More than that, the sword was created specifically to combat evil magic, designed centuries ago by a smith who understood the importance of having weapons that could pierce supernatural defenses. If anyone can face Magus on equal terms, it is someone wielding the reforged Masamune. The quest to repair the sword takes them across multiple eras, gathering materials and assistance from craftsmen separated by centuries. They retrieve the broken pieces from the Denadoro Mountains, fight through monsters that have made the ruins their lair, and carry the fragments to Melchior, who in the year 1000 runs a modest smithy, but in truth is the guru of life from Zeal, thrown forward through time by the Ocean Palace catastrophe. He recognizes the Masamune immediately, knows its history and importance, and agrees to reforge it, but he needs a special material to bind the blade, Dreamstone. Dreamstone exists only in the Age of Zeal, that floating kingdom 12,000 years in the past. The travelers must journey to antiquity, to that time before the kingdom's fall, and somehow acquire the rare mineral without alerting Queen Zeal to their presence or purpose. They navigate the complications of time travel and social infiltration, eventually securing the Dreamstone and returning it to Melchior. The old smith works for days, his hammer ringing against anvil, his magic flowing into metal, reforging the shattered pieces into something whole and even stronger than before. The restored Masamune is a thing of beauty and terrible purpose, its blade gleaming with inner light, humming with barely restrained power. But the sword will not allow just anyone to wield it. When Crono tries to lift it, the blade refuses to move, as if it weighs thousands of pounds. Only when Frog approaches and reaches out with his webbed hand does the Masamune respond, rising easily, perfectly balanced, singing its readiness for battle. The sword recognizes something in Frog, sees past his appearance to the knight Glen, who still exists beneath the curse, and it accepts him as worthy where it rejected all others. Armed with a reforged Masamune, Frog feels Cyrus's spirit speaking to him, urging him to move forward, to stop living in the past and embrace the present. His friend's death cannot be undone. His transformation may be permanent, but he can still choose to be the hero Cyrus always believed he could become. Frog makes his decision. He will join Crono's quest, will fight against Magus and ultimately against Lavos itself, will honor his friend's memory through deeds rather than regret. The group returns to the Middle Ages with renewed purpose, gathering intelligence on Magus's location and plans. They learn that the warlock has been conducting a massive ritual at his fortress, gathering power for some ultimate spell. Some believe he intends to summon a demon from the depths. Others think he plans to wipe out humanity in a single catastrophic working of magic. The truth, they discover through infiltration and careful investigation, is something completely unexpected. Magus has no interest in conquering humanity or serving demon lords. His entire campaign against Guardia, his leadership of the mystics, his accumulation of magical power, all of it has been in service of a single goal: summoning and destroying Lavos. He has known about the creature since his childhood, learned of it from his sister Shala in the kingdom of Zeal. When he was thrown back through time and raised by mystics, he spent years studying magic and history, learning everything he could about Lavos and its nature. The ritual he prepares is meant to call the creature forth before its time, to fight it when he is prepared rather than waiting for it to emerge on its own schedule. The travelers arrive at Magus's fortress as the ritual reaches its crescendo. They fight through his mystic army, past his elite guards, through magical barriers and summon creatures. Finally, they confront the warlock himself in his inner sanctum, where energy crackles in the air and reality seems thin and fragile. Frog demands answers, demands justice for Cyrus, demands that Magus face the consequences of his cruelty. The warlock, in turn, barely remembers Glen, dismisses Cyrus as just another dead knight in a world full of corpses, and focuses his attention on completing the ritual despite these interruptions. The battle that follows is desperate and chaotic. Magus wields magic with a proficiency that makes him seem almost invincible, throwing spells that alter physics and bend space. But the Masamune pierces his defenses, disrupting his magic, forcing him onto the defensive for perhaps the first time in his life. As they fight, the ritual continues autonomously, the energies Magus gathered now beyond any ability to control or stop. A portal tears open in the sanctum, not to Lavos's current location, but to a different time entirely, pulling at everyone in the chamber with irresistible force. Crono makes a split-second decision. Rather than let Magus be killed by the collapsing ritual, rather than lose the only person in this era who might know more about Lavos, he grabs the warlock and drags him into the portal. Frog follows without hesitation, unwilling to let his nemesis escape, and the rest of the group has no choice but to dive through after them. The portal swallows them all and deposits them in a place none of them ever expected to visit, the Kingdom of Zeal, in the days before its fall, at the very moment when Queen Zeal's madness reaches its peak and the world stands on the edge of catastrophe. When they emerge from the portal, disoriented and scattered by the violent transition, the travelers find themselves in a world that seems like something from a dream or ancient legend. The floating islands of Zeal stretch out before them, gleaming in eternal sunlight, their crystalline structures refracting light into prismatic displays of impossible beauty. Citizens in elegant robes glide past on platforms of solidified air, engaged in conversations about magical theory and philosophical speculation. This is the golden age, the peak of human achievement, and it is more magnificent and terrible than anything they could have imagined from historical fragments and legends. Magus, seeing the kingdom of his childhood for the first time in 14 centuries, is struck momentarily silent by memories and emotions he had thought long buried. This is the home he lost, the civilization that raised and then abandoned him, and being here again, tears open old wounds. But he recovers quickly, his face hardening into its customary mask of cold calculation. He knows what is coming, knows that these islands will soon fall from the sky, and part of him welcomes the opportunity to witness it firsthand, to understand exactly what went wrong on that day when his world ended. They quickly realize they have arrived at a crucial moment in history. Queen Zeal's Ocean Palace project is near completion. The massive underwater structure, now fully operational and preparing for its first full activation of the enhanced Mammon machine. The Queen has declared that tonight will mark a new era for Zeal, that they will finally achieve the immortality and unlimited power they have sought. Her eyes burn with fanatic intensity as she makes this proclamation, and those who know her, including her children, can see that she is no longer entirely sane. Princess Shala moves through the palace like a ghost, fulfilling her duties as operator of the Mammon machine, while her heart breaks with knowledge of what this will cost. She has tried reasoning with her mother, tried pleading with the palace authorities, tried everything she can think of to stop this catastrophe, but no one will listen. The enlightened ones of Zeal are too drunk on their own superiority to consider that they might be wrong, too convinced of their mastery over magic to imagine consequences they cannot control. Shala feels trapped, forced to participate in something she knows is fundamentally wrong, powerless to prevent the disaster she sees approaching. The time travelers, still trying to understand their situation and find a way back to their own era, witness the preparations for the Ocean Palace activation. They see the arrogance of the enlightened ones, the suffering of the earthbound who slave below to support this floating paradise, and the manic determination of Queen Zeal as she drives her kingdom toward its doom. Magus watches all of this with complex emotions playing across his usually impassive face. He sees himself as the boy Janus, that quiet child who clutched his cat and spoke of black winds. He sees his sister, not as the memory preserved across centuries, but as she was in life, kind and patient, and breaking under the weight of impossible burdens. When they encounter the prophet Shala has been consulting with, seeking guidance in these desperate times, they discover something shocking. The prophet wears concealing robes and a mask, speaking with authority about temporal mechanics and magical theory that seems far beyond what anyone in this era should understand. Then Magus removes his own disguise and reveals himself as the prophet, explains that he has been here before through a different path of time travel, that he established this identity to try influencing events from within. His presence here is both current, as he arrived with the party through the portal from 600, and historical, as a version of himself from a different timeline already exists here as the prophet. The temporal complications are dizzying, but there is no time to fully process them. Queen Zeal orders everyone to the Ocean Palace for the great activation. Shala is required to operate the Mammon machine. The prophet, which is to say the historical Magus, is demanded to attend as witness to the Queen's triumph. And Crono's group, viewed with suspicion by palace authorities, is brought along as prisoners or guests, the distinction unclear. They descend beneath the ocean in magical transports, passing through miles of water to reach the massive structure built on the sea floor. And there they witness the full scale of what Queen Zeal has constructed. The Ocean Palace is an architectural marvel that would be impossible in any age. Massive domes of crystal and metal glowing with magical energy create habitable chambers deep beneath crushing oceanic pressure. Corridors lined with technology that blends the mystical and mechanical connect dozens of chambers, each serving some function in the grand design. And at the heart of it all sits the enhanced Mammon machine, grown larger and more complex than the original device, its crystalline structure pulsing with barely contained power, drawn directly from Lavos' sleeping form. Queen Zeal takes her position before the machine, Marle beside her, and begins the activation sequence. Energy flows through carefully designed channels, power building to levels that make the air itself feel thick and dangerous. The Mammon machine draws more and more from Lavos, pulling harder on the connection, demanding greater output from the slumbering entity. For a moment, it seems the Queen's mad. Vision might actually succeed, that Zeal will achieve its ascension to true godhood through stolen power. Then everything goes catastrophically wrong. Lavos, disturbed in its ancient sleep by this constant drain on its energy, begins to wake. The creature's consciousness, dormant for millions of years, stirs and takes notice of the civilization that dares to exploit it. The Mammon machine, rather than channeling Lavos' power, becomes a direct conduit for its will. Queen Zeal, standing before the device she believed she controlled, is flooded with alien intelligence. Her mind suddenly expanded and simultaneously crushed by contact with something far beyond human comprehension. They approach the Mammon machine, that pulsing crystalline horror that connects directly to Lavos deep beneath the ocean floor, and the confrontation begins. But they are woefully unprepared for what happens next. Lavos, disturbed by the chaos and the attempts to interfere with the machine, awakens partially from its ancient sleep. A massive spike of energy erupts from the device, and suddenly the party faces not Queen Zeal's magic, but Lavos itself, or at least a manifestation of its terrible power channeled through the Mammon machine. The battle is hopelessly one-sided. Lavos' power, even filtered through the machine, vastly exceeds anything the party can counter. They are battered down one by one, their attacks meaningless against such overwhelming force. As Lavos prepares to obliterate them all with a final devastating energy blast, Crono makes his choice. He positions himself between his fallen friends and the incoming attack, his sword raised not in defiance, but as a futile gesture of protection, knowing he cannot survive what comes next, but unable to simply watch his companions die. Lavos releases a surge of destructive power so concentrated, so intense, that Crono is not merely killed but completely obliterated. The energy doesn't just destroy his body, but erases it entirely, not even ash remaining where he stood moments before. The attack is targeted with such precision that only Crono is caught in its full force, his sacrifice creating just enough time for Marle to act. She channels the last of her power through her pendant, opening a portal that swallows the surviving party members and Magus, forcibly evacuating them from the collapsing ocean palace before they can share Crono's fate. Marle screams his name, watching helplessly as the boy who became her friend, who never hesitated to help others, is erased from existence in an instant of overwhelming violence. The scene sears itself into the memories of all who witness it, a moment of absolute loss that seems beyond any possibility of reversal. Magus holds the others back from rushing toward where Crono stood, understanding that anyone who enters that maelstrom of Lavos' power will share his fate instantly. Sharla, acting with desperate urgency and the last reserves of her strength, activates her pendant's emergency functions, creating a portal that will evacuate everyone from the Ocean Palace before the entire structure collapses completely. She forces the surviving travelers through, uses her magic to send them away to safety, but she cannot go with them. Someone must remain to contain the disaster, to try limiting the damage, to do what little can be done when a civilization stands at the edge of total annihilation. As the portal closes, the travelers catch one final glimpse of Sharla, standing alone in the collapsing Ocean Palace, her hands raised in a desperate spell, trying to seal away the unleashed power. Then they are gone, deposited on the surface world, as the floating islands of Zeal begin to fall from the sky. The magical energy maintaining their levitation fails as the Mammon machine goes critical. One by one, the great achievements of this civilization plummet from the clouds, their crystalline structures shattering on impact, their citizens dying in the thousands as their golden age ends in fire and screaming and the terrible sound of shattering dreams. The kingdom of Zeal falls, literally and metaphorically, its ruins scattered across the surface and the ocean floor. The enlightened ones who survive lose their magical abilities in the catastrophe. The energy that sustained their powers cut off by the Mammon machine's destruction. They become ordinary humans, forced to live on the frozen surface alongside the earthbound they once despised, and their descendants will eventually forget they were ever anything more than common people. The knowledge of magic fades into myth and legend. The floating islands become stories told to children. An entire civilization is erased from history, remembered only in fragments and distorted tales. The travelers stand on the surface, watching the kingdom burn as it falls, mourning Crono who sacrificed himself in a doomed attempt to protect them from Lavos' wrath. Magus looks up at the apocalypse with eyes that have seen this before, in nightmares and memories, and finally understands what truly happened on the day his childhood ended. Marle collapses in grief, sobbing for the boy who became her first real friend, who never hesitated to help others, who gave everything trying to save people he barely knew from a threat beyond comprehension. Lucca watches the falling islands with tears streaming down her face, mentally replaying every moment leading to this catastrophe, wondering if there was something different they could have done, some way they could have saved both Crono and Zeal without this terrible cost. But even in this moment of absolute loss, hope persists in a most unexpected form. Gaspar appears to them through a temporal projection, speaking from the end of time. He tells them that while Crono's body was destroyed, his existence is not entirely erased. Time itself remembers him. His actions have left imprints on reality, and with the right tools and sufficient determination, it might be possible to pull him back from beyond death itself. It is a slim hope, perhaps an impossible one, but it is hope nonetheless, and they cling to it like drowning sailors clutching wreckage in a storm. The death of Crono transforms their quest from a desperate mission to prevent the apocalypse into something more personal and immediate. Before they can save the world, they must save their friend, must find a way to undo what seemed like an unavoidable consequence of attacking the Mammon machine. Gaspar directs them toward a device called the Chrono Trigger, an artifact that exists outside normal time, created by someone with understanding of temporal mechanics that surpasses even the gurus of Zeal. The search for the Chrono Trigger takes them to the year 2300 again, to that devastated future they first witnessed what feels like ages ago, though in their personal timeline, only weeks have passed. They navigate the ruined landscape with new purpose, seeking out the location Gaspar described. Deep within a collapsed research facility, they find a door marked with symbols that seem to shift and change when viewed from different angles, suggesting it exists in multiple time periods simultaneously. Beyond the door lies something impossible, a pristine laboratory, completely untouched by the apocalypse that destroyed everything around it. The facility is maintained by automated systems that have continued functioning for 300 years without any apparent degradation. And at the center of this preserved space sits an elderly man in a wheelchair, surrounded by computer terminals and equipment that appears far more advanced than anything else in this era. He introduces himself as Balthazar, the guru of reason, thrown forward through time by the Ocean Palace catastrophe and stranded in this distant future. Balthazar explains his situation with the resigned acceptance of someone who has had centuries to make peace with his fate. When he arrived in this era, he found himself in a world already devastated by Lavos, surrounded by the ruins of human civilization. He was initially driven mad by the isolation and despair, watching humanity's last survivors slowly dying in their dome settlements, while he possessed knowledge that could have prevented the apocalypse but arrived too late to use it. Eventually, he channeled his grief and madness into purpose, dedicating his remaining years to creating tools that might help others succeed where he had failed. The Chrono Trigger is his masterwork, a device that can create a temporal duplicate of a person who has been erased from the timeline. It functions by accessing the imprints that individual left on reality, the countless small changes they made through their actions and choices, and using those echoes to reconstruct their existence. But the device requires power beyond anything normally available, a source of energy capable of bridging dimensions and reconstituting matter from pure information. The only power source sufficient for this task is a fragment of Lavos itself, something called the Sunstone that was created in ancient zeal by harnessing a tiny portion of the creature's energy. But even with the Chrono Trigger and the Sunstone, one more component is needed, something to serve as a physical anchor, an item so intimately connected to Crono that it can serve as a bridge between his erased existence and restoration. After much debate, they realize the answer is a clone, a perfect duplicate of Crono created through magic and genetics. This clone can be used as a physical template, allowing the Chrono Trigger to rebuild the original by comparing what should exist against what does exist and correcting the discrepancy. The quest to gather these components takes the party across multiple eras and challenges them in ways both physical and emotional. The Sunstone exists in the Age of Zeal, but retrieving it requires returning to that era and infiltrating what remains of the kingdom after its fall. Queen Zeal survived the catastrophe, transformed by her contact with Lavos into something that is no longer entirely human. She has raised a massive fortress called the Black Omen, a structure that exists simultaneously in multiple time periods, hovering over the ocean as a monument to her twisted ambitions. They must also seek out Magus again, the warlock having disappeared after the Ocean Palace catastrophe. They find him in a hidden lair, consumed by guilt and rage over his failure to save Shala. He has been searching for any trace of his sister, following leads and legends, investigating every rumor that might point to her survival. When the party arrives, he attacks them on instinct, assuming they have come for revenge or to stop his search. But when they explain their purpose, when they reveal they are trying to resurrect Crono and ultimately prevent Lavos' emergence, Magus makes an unexpected choice. He joins them, setting aside his quest for Shala temporarily to focus on the larger goal. If they can destroy Lavos before it emerges, if they can prevent the creature from ever waking, then perhaps the temporal disruptions it caused will also be undone. Perhaps Shala, lost somewhere in the dimensional chaos created by the Ocean Palace collapse, can be found and saved. It is a slim hope, the same desperate possibility that drives their quest to resurrect Crono, but hope is all any of them have left. With Margus's knowledge of ancient magic and the locations of artifacts, they systematically gather what they need. The Sunstone is recovered from a hidden chamber in Zeal's ruins, still glowing with captured energy after 12,000 years. They acquire materials for the cloning ritual from various eras, combining medieval alchemy with advanced biotechnology scavenged from the future. And finally, they perform the resurrection ritual at the exact moment and location where Crono died, creating a temporal loop that allows them to pluck him from the instant before his destruction and replace him with the clone. The process is extraordinarily complex, requiring perfect timing and coordination across multiple time periods. Gaspar guides them from the end of time. Balthazar monitors the dimensional stresses from his laboratory, and Melchior provides magical stabilization from his smithy. The party members each play crucial roles, channeling energy through their own bodies, maintaining the spell structures, anchoring the temporal loop against reality's attempts to collapse it. For a moment that stretches into subjective eternity, they exist in a state between success and failure, their friend's existence hanging in a balance measured in quantum probabilities. Then, impossibly, it works. Crono materializes before them, solid and real, gasping for breath as if he had been drowning. He is confused and disoriented, his memories of the Ocean Palace catastrophe fragmented and incomplete, but he is alive, pulled back from oblivion through the combined effort of friends who refuse to accept his death as final. The reunion is emotional and overwhelming, tears and laughter mixing together, the party clinging to each other with the desperate relief of people who have stared into loss and somehow, against all reason, been granted a second chance. But even as they celebrate Crono's return, they know their larger quest remains incomplete. Lavos still sleeps beneath the earth, still destined to emerge in 1999 and destroy civilization. The resurrection has brought them back their friend and proven that time itself can be manipulated in ways they are only beginning to understand. But it hasn't solved the fundamental problem. They must still find a way to destroy Lavos before the day of Lavos arrives, and that confrontation will require them to be stronger than they currently are, better equipped, more prepared than any group of travelers has ever been for such an impossible task. Gaspar suggests they focus on the side quests that have accumulated during their journey through time, the personal stories and unresolved conflicts that each party member carries. These are not distractions from their main goal, but essential preparations. Each challenge they overcome makes them stronger. Each personal demon they confront helps them grow, and that growth will be necessary when they finally face Lavos. More than that, confronting these individual struggles helps them bond as a team, forging connections that transcend mere friendship and become something approaching family. Lucca's quest takes them back to the year 990, 10 years before their own era, to a moment in her childhood that has haunted her ever since. Her mother Lara was working in Lucca's father's workshop when her dress caught in a machine's gears. Young Lucca, only 10 years old, tried desperately to stop the machine, but she did not understand the mechanism, could not figure out the combination of levers and switches needed to shut it down in time. Lara's legs were crushed before the machine finally powered down, leaving her wheelchair bound for life. Lucca has carried the guilt of that failure for a decade, convinced that if she had been smarter or faster or more mechanically inclined, she could have saved her mother from that fate. Traveling back to that moment, adult Lucca witnesses her younger self struggling with the machine, while her mother screams in pain and terror. This time, Lucca knows the correct sequence. She reaches through time itself, guiding her younger self's hands to the right levers, helping her past self shut down the machine before the injury occurs. When they return to their own time, Lara walks on healthy legs, the accident having never happened, and Lucca finally releases the guilt that has driven her obsessive pursuit of knowledge and invention. She understands now that she could not have saved her mother as a child because she lacked the knowledge, but through time travel, through the impossible quest she is on, she has gained the power to heal even that old wound. Robo's journey leads them to a future beyond the apocalypse, to a time period 400 years after the day of Lavos. They find a forest there, impossible and wonderful, trees growing in soil that should be poisoned and dead. The forest was planted by other robots, Robo's brothers and sisters from the same production line, who spent centuries working to restore the planet's ecology, one seed at a time. But those robots have been deactivated now, their power sources finally exhausted after 400 years of constant labor. Robo stands among them, his mechanical family, and grieves for their sacrifice and dedication. The party helps him honor their memory, maintaining the forest they created, and ensuring their work continues even though they cannot. Frog's quest is perhaps the most personally confronting. He must decide whether to remain in his cursed form or attempt to break the spell Magus cast upon him. With Magus now traveling as part of their group, the tension between the two is palpable. Frog carries centuries of anger and grief, still mourning Cyrus, still burning with rage over his transformation. Magus, for his part, barely remembers the incident, dismisses it as a minor cruelty among countless others committed in his long campaign against humanity and Lavos. The confrontation between them reaches its peak at Cyrus's grave, where Frog has been maintaining a solitary vigil for years. Magus offers to reverse the transformation spell, acknowledging that while he cannot undo Cyrus's death, he can at least restore Frog to his human form. But in that moment, Frog makes a choice that surprises everyone, himself included. He refuses. The frog form is no longer a curse but a reminder of who he was and who he has become. Glenn, the frightened squire, died the day Cyrus fell. Frog the Knight was born in that moment, and he has earned his identity through countless battles and acts of courage. Changing back would be running from himself, and he is done running from anything. The decision brings a measure of peace between the two former enemies. They will never be friends, the wounds are too deep and the death too many, but they can work together toward the common goal of destroying Lavos. Sometimes that is enough, that pragmatic cooperation, that acknowledgement that past grievances matter less than preventing future catastrophe. Marle's quest connects to her strained relationship with her father, the King of Guardia. She has always felt constrained by the expectations of royalty, smothered by protocols and guards and endless lessons in how to be a proper princess. But traveling through time, seeing the different versions of Guardia across the centuries, she has gained perspective on what it means to lead and what her father has been trying to teach her. When they return to her era, she initiates a genuine conversation with the king, and both of them apologize for their stubbornness. He promises to give her more freedom. She promises to take her responsibilities more seriously, and they find a middle ground that neither had thought possible before her temporal adventures gave her the maturity to appreciate what her father was attempting, however clumsily, to provide. As these personal quests are completed, the party grows stronger in ways both measurable and subtle. Their equipment improves through discoveries in various eras. Their magic abilities deepen through training and experience. More importantly, their bonds strengthen, the trust between them becoming absolute. They have fought together across time, have seen each other at their best and worst, have shared griefs and triumphs that would be impossible to explain to anyone who was not there. They are no longer merely a group of individuals with a common goal. They are a team, a unit, perhaps even a family forged in the fires of temporal chaos. When they finally feel ready, when every preparation has been made and every advantage secured, they turn their attention to the Black Omen, Queen Zeal's fortress that exists simultaneously across multiple eras. The structure is a monument to madness and ambition, a twisted spire of crystal and darkness that hovers over the ocean, visible from the Middle Ages to the present day to the ruined future. Inside, Queen Zeal waits with her most powerful servants, and at the fortress's heart lies a direct connection to Lavos itself. The assault on the Black Omen is a gauntlet of challenges that tests everything they have learned. They fight through constructs and monsters, face down elite guards who wield magic and technology with equal proficiency, solve puzzles that require understanding of multiple eras and disciplines. The fortress seems designed specifically to break them, each trial targeting their weaknesses, each combat encounter pushing them to their limits. But they persevere through determination and teamwork, each member supporting the others when one falters, their combined strength proving greater than any individual could achieve alone. At the top of the Black Omen, they confront Queen Zeal herself. She has been completely consumed by Lavos's influence, her humanity burned away by prolonged exposure to the creature's power. She recognizes Magus as her son, speaks to him with a mockery of maternal affection, but there is nothing left of the woman who once raised him. She is merely a puppet now, dancing on strings of alien will, mouthing words that carry no genuine emotion behind them. The battle with her is heartbreaking and necessary, and when they finally defeat her, Magus shows no relief or satisfaction, only the grim acknowledgement that his mother died 10,000 years ago at the Ocean Palace, and what they just destroyed was merely wearing her corpse. With the queen defeated, the path to Lavos lies open. They can feel the creature now, a vast presence beneath their feet, its consciousness pressing against the world like a physical weight. The time has come for the confrontation they have been preparing for since they first witnessed the devastated future, since they first understood what threat sleeps in the planet's core. There is no more time for preparation, no more side quests or power-ups to pursue. They must descend into the earth and face the entity that destroyed civilization, must somehow find a way to kill something that has survived for millions of years by feeding on entire worlds. They take one final moment together before the descent, gathering in a circle and acknowledging what they mean to each other. Crono and Marle finally admit their feelings openly, no longer hiding behind friendly casual language. Lucca makes peace with her fear of inadequacy, accepting that her intelligence and invention have proven just as valuable as any sword or magic. Frog speaks with Cyrus's ghost one final time, receiving his friend's blessing to move forward. Robo considers what it means to be alive and concludes that consciousness and emotion matter more than biology. Magus thinks of Shala and promises silently that he will find her after this is over, that destroying Lavos is merely the first step in a longer quest. They descend through caverns that grow increasingly alien the deeper they go, through layers of rock that bear scars of Lavos' passage, past fossils of creatures that died when the entity first crashed into the planet. The heat and pressure increase with each step down, until they are moving through conditions that should be impossible for human survival, maintained only by magic and sheer determination. And finally, at the bottom of the world, in a cavern larger than cities, they find it. Lavos is enormous beyond comprehension, its shell alone larger than mountains, composed of material that is part organic and part mineral, grown over millions of years of feeding on the planet's core. The creature is beautiful in its own terrible way, a spiral of evolutionary perfection, every part of it designed for maximum efficiency at its cosmic task. It radiates power that makes the air shimmer, and just being in its presence feels like standing too close to a furnace. This is what destroyed civilization in 1999. This is what has been sleeping beneath their feet for 65 million years, patient and terrible and utterly alien in thought and purpose. The battle begins. Lavos does not speak, perhaps cannot speak, but it responds to their challenge by shifting through forms. The creature displays an ability to manipulate its own biology, reshaping its body to draw upon the genetic information it has collected from millions of years of sampling life on this planet. It becomes partly human, partly dinosaur, partly mystic, partly things that have no name because they existed in eras long forgotten. Each form brings different abilities, different attacks, different challenges that force the party to adapt constantly. They fight with everything they have learned and earned across their journey through time. Crono wields the rainbow sword, an ultimate weapon forged from materials gathered across multiple eras. Marle channels healing magic more powerful than anything her royal instructors could teach, keeping the party alive through attacks that should kill them instantly. Lucca deploys weapons that blend science and magic, guns that shoot concentrated temporal energy capable of disrupting Lavos' cellular structure. Frog's Masamoon sings as it cuts through the creature's defenses, the legendary blade proving worthy of its reputation. Robo calculates weak points and attack patterns with mechanical precision, coordinating their efforts into maximum efficiency. Magus channels dark magic with a proficiency born of centuries of study and preparation, his spells tearing holes in reality that damage Lavos on a fundamental level. The battle lasts hours, or perhaps only minutes that feel like eternity. They push Lavos through its various forms, forcing it to adapt, to evolve, to draw upon deeper reserves of power. The creature begins using temporal attacks, manipulating time itself to strike at them from multiple moments simultaneously. It summons projections of enemies they fought in the past, forcing them to relive old battles while also confronting new threats. It attempts to break their spirits by showing them visions of the future they are trying to prevent. The burning cities and dying screams of the day of Lavos played out in excruciating detail. But they persevere because they must, because giving up means condemning billions to death, because they have come too far and sacrificed too much to fail now. They pour everything into this final confrontation, spending their lives like currency, trading injuries and pain for small advantages, pushing themselves beyond exhaustion into a state where only will keeps them moving. And slowly, impossibly, they begin to win. Lavos' regeneration slows, its attacks become less coordinated, cracks appear in its shell that do not immediately heal. The final form is the hardest, Lavos reshaping itself into something that seems to embody time itself, a being that exists across multiple moments simultaneously. But even this proves insufficient against the combined might of heroes drawn from across history. With one final coordinated assault, channeling every remaining bit of strength and magic and technology. They pierce through to Lavos's core and destroy the biological center that has sustained the creature for millions of years. The death of Lavos is not a dramatic explosion, but rather a gradual fading, the creature's vast presence slowly diminishing as its body loses cohesion and begins to break down. The cavern around them starts collapsing, reality itself destabilizing as the entity that has been part of this world for so long is finally removed. They escape back to the surface through temporal gates that open automatically, Lavos's death releasing all the time distortions it had created, allowing them passage back to their own era. When they emerge into the present day of 1000 Common Era, they find a world subtly but significantly changed. The future is no longer fixed. The devastation of 2300 will not occur because Lavos is dead, killed before it could emerge and destroy civilization. But the changes ripple backward as well as forward. Small details are different. Buildings that should be ruins are intact. People who should have died in various disasters influenced by Lavos's presence now live full lives. The timeline has been altered in countless small ways that accumulate into something fundamentally different. The millennial fair is happening again, or perhaps still happening, time having looped in ways none of them fully understand. They walk through the festival grounds, and it feels like both the first time and a homecoming, familiar and strange all at once. Marle looks at Crono and asks if he thinks things will truly be different now, if they have actually changed the future or merely postponed the inevitable. Crono, who has always been more about action than contemplation, simply smiles and says that they will face whatever comes together, and that is all the certainty anyone can ever really have. Lucca finds herself contemplating the nature of time and causality, wondering whether they created a new timeline or altered the existing one, whether the devastated future they witnessed still exists in some parallel dimension, or if it was truly erased. The questions are profound and probably unanswerable, but she takes comfort in knowing that at least in this timeline, in this version of reality, the apocalypse will not occur as they witnessed it. That has to be enough. Frog chooses to return to his own era, to the Middle Ages where he belongs, with Magus no longer leading the mystics in their war against humanity, with the temporal distortions that empowered various threats now dispersed. Perhaps there can finally be peace between the species. He intends to work toward that peace, to honor Cyrus's memory not through revenge, but through building something better. He says his goodbyes to the party with solemn dignity, expressing gratitude for the journey they shared and the person he became through their trials together. Robo opts to return to the future, to the forest his siblings planted. He will maintain their work, continue the restoration of the planet's ecosystem, ensure that the future, while no longer devastated by Lavos, still receives the care and attention that his mechanical family dedicated their existence to providing. It is a purpose he has chosen for himself rather than one programmed into him, and that choice makes it meaningful in ways his original function never was. Magus disappears without farewell, slipping away from the celebrations to resume his search for Shala. He believes that with Lavos destroyed, with the temporal chaos it created gradually settling, he might finally find traces of what happened to his sister. Whether he succeeds is a story for another time, but his determination has not wavered despite centuries of searching. Some quests, some bonds, transcend reason and persist through sheer force of will. Crono, Marle and Lucca remain together, standing at the fair as celebration erupts around them. They have saved the world, prevented an apocalypse, rewritten the future through courage and friendship, and refusal to accept fate as immutable. But they know that time is not something that can be truly controlled or fully understood. They have glimpsed only a fragment of its vast complexity, manipulated a few threads in a tapestry beyond complete comprehension. There may be other timelines, other possibilities, other threats emerging from the corridors of history that will require heroes to confront them. But for now, in this moment, in this version of history, there is peace. The sun shines on the millennial fair. Music plays and people laugh. Children run between festival stalls without fear of tomorrow. And three friends who traveled through time and changed the world stand together, watching the celebration, content in the knowledge that they did what needed to be done, and that the future, whatever form it takes, will have the chance to unfold without the shadow of apocalypse hanging over it. The story of Chrono Trigger is ultimately a story about choice and consequence, about how small actions ripple through time to create vast changes, about the power of friendship to overcome impossible odds. It tells us that history is not fixed, that destiny can be challenged, that the future is not something that simply happens to us, but something we create through our decisions and actions. It reminds us that heroes are not born from destiny alone, but forged through trials and choices, through failures and successes, through the bonds they form with others who share their struggle. Across 13,000 years, from the arrival of Lavos to its ultimate destruction, countless lives were touched by the creature's presence. Civilizations rose and fell in its shadow. Heroes and villains made their choices, pursuing their visions of what the world should be. Some sought power and immortality, like Queen Zeal. Others sought revenge and destruction, like Graf in another story. But in the end, it was friendship, cooperation, and the refusal to accept hopelessness that prevailed. The party's journey took them from the familiar present through the ruined future, back to the violent past and the frozen age of Zeal's glory. They witnessed the dawn of human intelligence in the prehistoric era, the medieval struggles between species, the rise and fall of magical civilization, and the potential end of all things. Each era taught them something, challenged them in different ways, added pieces to the puzzle they were trying to solve. And what they learned ultimately was that time is not the cruel tyrant it appears to be. Yes, the past cannot be changed in the conventional sense, and yes, actions have consequences that echo forward through history. But time is also more flexible than it seems, more responsive to will and determination. When people refuse to accept terrible futures, when they fight against fate with everything they have, sometimes reality itself yields and allows new possibilities to emerge. The technology and magic they gathered across their journey became tools, but the real weapon against Lavos was something simpler and more profound. Hope. The hope that things could be different, that sacrifice could mean something, that fighting against impossible odds was worthwhile even when success seemed impossible. That hope sustained them through every trial, every loss, every moment when giving up would have been easier than continuing. Crono's sacrifice at the Ocean Palace could have been the end of their quest, the final proof that some things cannot be undone, and some deaths are permanent. But they refused to accept that ending, pursued the possibility of resurrection with the same determination they brought to every other challenge. And in doing so, they proved that even death itself is not always final, that time's wounds can sometimes be healed, that what seems impossible might simply be very, very difficult. The personal growth each character experienced was as important as their battle prowess. Lucca, learning to forgive herself for past failures. Marle understanding the responsibilities that come with privilege. Frog accepting his transformed identity and finding strength in what he had viewed as weakness. Robo discovering that consciousness and choice matter more than programming or original purpose. Magus confronting his past and working with former enemies toward common goals. Each of them became more than they were at the journey's beginning, shaped by hardship into heroes worthy of their impossible quest. The game's multiple endings, branching possibilities depending on when players choose to confront Lavos, reflect the story's central theme about choice and consequence. Defeating Lavos at different points in the timeline creates different versions of the future, each with their own unique outcomes. This mechanical feature reinforces the narrative message that time is not a single fixed path, but a web of possibilities, and the choices we make determine which possibility becomes reality. In some timelines, characters who died remain dead. In others, they survive and thrive. The party's actions throughout history create ripples that affect countless lives in ways both large and small. A decision made in the prehistoric era might save a village in the Middle Ages. An artifact recovered from Zeal might prevent a tragedy in the present. Everything connects, every choice matters, and the web of causality becomes so complex that fully understanding it would require a perspective outside time itself, the kind of viewpoint that only beings like Gaspar at the end of time might possess. The game never fully explains certain mysteries, leaving questions that invite contemplation rather than providing easy answers. What happened to Marle after the Ocean Palace collapsed? The answer is deliberately ambiguous, allowing players to imagine various possibilities. Did she survive somewhere beyond normal time and space? Was she absorbed into Lavos's temporal dimension? Could she be saved, or was she truly lost in that catastrophe? The story provides hints but no definitive resolution, treating this as a mystery worthy of respect, rather than something to be casually resolved. Similarly, the nature of Lavos itself remains partially mysterious. Is it truly just a cosmic parasite following biological imperatives, or does it possess genuine intelligence and malice? The game provides evidence that could support either interpretation. Lavos can be understood as a force of nature, no more evil than a virus or natural disaster, simply following its life cycle without moral consideration. But it can also be seen as having awareness and purpose, given how it seems to influence evolution and respond to threats. The truth likely lies somewhere in the complexity between these extremes, suggesting an alien intelligence so different from human consciousness that our categories of thought and purpose may not adequately describe its nature. The tragedy of Zeal resonates throughout the story as a cautionary tale about hubris and the pursuit of power without wisdom. Here was a civilization that achieved wonders, that mastered magic and created beauty beyond imagination, yet destroyed itself through arrogance and unwillingness to acknowledge limits. Queen Zeal's descent from wise ruler to megalomaniacal tyrant, driven by prolonged contact with Lavos's power, suggests that some forces are too dangerous to wield regardless of how advanced or intelligent a civilization becomes. The Enlightened One's treatment of the Earthbound reflects real-world patterns of inequality and rationalization. Those with power convince themselves that they deserve their privileges, that those without power were somehow inferior rather than simply unlucky. The floating islands represented not just magical achievement, but social stratification, taken to its logical extreme, with the elite literally rising above those they deemed unworthy. When Zeal fell and the enlightened lost their magic, they were forced to live as equals with the earthbound, and in that forced equality came the possibility of better society, one not divided by arbitrary distinctions of power. Robo's existence raises questions about consciousness and personhood that the story treats with surprising depth for a game from the mid-90s. Is Robo truly alive, truly conscious, or merely programmed to simulate these qualities? The game's answer is unambiguous. Consciousness is consciousness regardless of substrate, and a Robo's emotions and choices are as real as any biological beings. The forest sequence, where Robo mourns his deactivated siblings, emphasizes that artificial beings can possess the same capacity for love, grief, and dedication that humans claim as uniquely their own. The relationship between Crono and Marle develops naturally across the journey, growing from chance meeting to deep bond through shared trials. Their romance is understated, never becoming the story's primary focus, but always present as an emotional thread that adds warmth to the larger narrative of preventing apocalypse. They represent the idea that even while saving the world, personal connections matter, that love and friendship are not distractions from important work, but rather the reasons that work matters at all. Lucca's role as the intellectual heart of the party, the one who understands the mechanics of time travel and constantly works to comprehend the impossible things they witness, makes her essential beyond her combat capabilities. She represents humanity's impulse toward understanding, the belief that knowledge can solve problems, and that even the most complex mysteries can be unraveled through careful study and brilliant invention. Her personal quest about saving her mother demonstrates that understanding has value beyond theoretical knowledge, that the point of learning is ultimately to help people and prevent suffering. Frog's story arc from frightened squire to confident knight, from cursed creature ashamed of his form to someone who embraces his identity, provides perhaps the most complete character transformation in the game. His relationship with Cyrus, the grief he carries, and the guilt he feels, drives him through the Middle Ages portion of the story. But his ultimate decision to retain his frog form, to accept it as part of who he has become rather than something to be cured or reversed, represents genuine growth. He stops defining himself by what he lost and starts defining himself by what he has become. Magus remains the most complex and morally ambiguous character in the party. He has committed atrocities, led wars that killed thousands, transformed Glenn into a frog out of casual cruelty. Yet he is also a victim, a child torn from his family and raised by those who should have been his enemies, driven by desperate need to find his lost sister. His redemption arc, if it can be called that, is incomplete and uncertain. He helps save the world, not out of altruism, but because it serves his personal goals. He never truly apologizes for his crimes or seeks forgiveness. Yet he is allowed to be part of the solution, suggesting that past evil does not permanently disqualify someone from doing good in the present, that people are complex and cannot be reduced to simple categories of hero or villain. The multiple time periods serve not just as settings, but as thematic explorations of different aspects of civilization and human nature. The prehistoric era represents raw survival and the beginning of intelligence, where strength and determination matter more than sophistication. The antiquity of zeal shows achievement taken to dangerous extremes, wisdom forgotten in pursuit of power. The Middle Ages depicts perpetual conflict between species and ideologies, the tragedy of endless war. The present day represents relative peace and normalcy, the mundane world that heroes must protect from threats they cannot even perceive. And the future shows consequences, the price of failure. What happens when threats go unconfronted and apocalypses arrive unopposed? Moving between these eras creates a unique narrative structure that video games are particularly well suited to explore. Players do not simply hear about history or read about the future. They experience these different time periods directly, walking through them, interacting with their inhabitants, witnessing firsthand how the same locations transform across centuries. The town of Truce exists in multiple eras, and seeing how it changes, what persists and what is lost, creates a tangible sense of time's passage that conventional linear narratives cannot easily achieve. The music of Chrono Trigger, composed by Yasunori Mitsuda and Nobuo Uematsu, reinforces the emotional weight of the story at every turn. Each era has its own distinctive musical themes that capture the essence of that time period. The prehistoric era's music is primal and rhythmic, built on drums and simple melodies that evoke a world before complex civilization. Zeal's themes are ethereal and majestic, full of soaring strings and crystalline tones that suggest both beauty and danger. The future's music is sparse and melancholic, industrial sounds mixed with lonely melodies that perfectly capture the despair of a world after apocalypse. Key moments are punctuated by musical cues that become inseparable from the emotional content. The theme that plays when Crono is struck down at the Ocean Palace is devastating in its simplicity, a few notes that convey absolute loss. The triumphant swell when the party finally destroys Lavos, the gentle melody during quiet moments between Crono and Marle, the manic energy of boss battles, all of it combines to create an emotional landscape that amplifies the narrative. Players remember not just what happened, but how the music made them feel as it happened. The End of Time, Gaspar's domain where all eras connect, serves as both a practical hub for time travel and a philosophical statement about the nature of temporality. This place exists outside normal history, a dimensional nexus where past, present, and future exist simultaneously. From this vantage point, time is not a river flowing in one direction, but a landscape that can be observed from above, where cause and effect become visible as patterns rather than sequential events. Gaspar's ability to see across all eras gives him a perspective that approaches omniscience. Yet even he cannot predict everything or control outcomes. He can offer guidance and tools, but the actual work of changing history must be done by those willing to dive back into the time stream and take action. The game's approach to time travel paradoxes is relatively forgiving compared to strictly logical interpretations. When Marle is mistaken for Queen Leene, her existence begins to fade, but she does not immediately cease to exist. There is a grace period, a window of opportunity to correct the paradox before reality finalizes the contradiction. This suggests that time has a certain elasticity, that changes do not instantly propagate through history, but rather ripple forward gradually, allowing for intervention and correction. It makes the time travel feel less like navigating a minefield of potential paradoxes and more like engaging with a complex but ultimately comprehensible system. The party's decision to resurrect Crono rather than simply continue without him demonstrates their priorities and values. From a purely pragmatic standpoint, they could have proceeded with their mission to destroy Lavos with the remaining party members, but they refused to accept that loss, refused to move forward while leaving their friend behind, even though pursuing his resurrection delays their larger mission and adds significant risk. This choice emphasizes that relationships matter more than efficiency, that the people we fight alongside are not merely tools to achieve goals, but ends in themselves, worthy of sacrifice and effort, simply because they matter to us. The Black Omen, Queen Zeal's final fortress, represents her complete transformation from wise ruler to servant of Lavos's will. The structure's existence across multiple eras simultaneously mirrors Lavos itself, suggesting that prolonged contact with the entity has given zeal a kind of temporal persistence that transcends normal human existence. She has become more than human, but less than herself, achieving a twisted form of immortality by surrendering her humanity. The fortress is beautiful in the way nightmares can be beautiful. All crystalline spires and impossible geometry, powered by energies that should not exist in natural reality. Fighting through the Black Omen is a gauntlet that tests everything the party has learned across their entire journey. Enemies and challenges drawn from all eras appear here, forcing them to apply strategies and techniques developed in different time periods. It is a final examination before the ultimate test, ensuring they have truly mastered the skills necessary to confront Lavos. The structure also serves as a physical manifestation of obsession and hubris. What happens when someone pursues power without limits or wisdom? When ambition becomes divorced from humanity? The various side quests and optional content throughout the game expand the world and add depth to characters in ways that enhance but do not distract from the main narrative. Helping Fiona restore the forest, competing in races, solving mysteries in different eras. All of these activities make the world feel more alive and lived in than it would if the story were purely linear. They also provide opportunities for character development outside the main plot, showing different facets of personality and allowing players to engage with the cast in contexts that are not life or death struggles against apocalypse. The decision to include multiple endings based on when players defeat Lavos creates narrative flexibility that rewards engagement and experimentation. Defeating Lavos early in the game, when the party is still relatively weak, requires significantly more skill and creates a different resolution than the standard ending. Some endings are bittersweet, others triumphant, a few outright comedic. This variability suggests that even within the story's universe, there are multiple possible futures, multiple ways events could unfold depending on timing and circumstance. It reinforces the game's central themes about choice and consequence, while also rewarding players who experiment with different approaches. The relationship between Lavos and the planet itself is essentially parasitic, but more complex than simple exploitation. Lavos does not simply drain energy and move on. It integrates itself deeply into the world's systems, becoming part of the planet's natural cycles over millions of years. Its presence influences evolution, guides the development of civilizations, shapes history in ways both obvious and subtle. By the time humanity develops the ability to perceive it as a threat, Lavos has become so thoroughly embedded in the planet's structure that removing it risks destabilizing everything. Yet the alternative is allowing it to eventually emerge and destroy everything anyway, creating a scenario with no safe options, only choices about which risks to accept. The tragedy is that Lavos' emergence in 1999 is not malicious but natural, simply the completion of its life cycle. The entity is following programming or instinct honed across billions of years of evolution, doing what it was designed by cosmic chance to do. There is no hatred in it, no desire to cause suffering, merely the mechanical unfolding of biological imperatives. This makes it, in some ways, more terrifying than a consciously evil antagonist, because you cannot reason with it, cannot appeal to its better nature, or negotiate a compromise. It simply is, and its existence requires humanity's extinction, making the conflict absolute and unavoidable. Yet the game also suggests that Lavos' influence was not entirely negative. The energy it radiates enabled magic to exist in the world. The genetic information it collected preserved species that would otherwise have been lost to extinction. Its temporal distortions created the gates that allowed time travel, gave the party the tools they needed to eventually destroy it. In its own way, Lavos cultivated the world, and part of that cultivation inadvertently created the very forces that would lead to its destruction. There is a strange poetry in that, the idea that parasites sometimes strengthen their hosts even as they feed on them, and that strengthening might ultimately lead to the host fighting back successfully. The philosophical questions the game raises about free will and destiny are never fully resolved, leaving room for interpretation and ongoing debate. Are the party members exercising free will by fighting Lavos, or are they following a destiny that was always going to unfold this way? Gaspar can see across time, suggesting the future might be fixed and knowable, yet the party's actions demonstrably change outcomes, suggesting plasticity in choice. Perhaps both are true somehow. Perhaps certain major events are fixed while the details of how they unfold remain variable. Or perhaps time is so complex that conventional concepts of determinism versus free will break down entirely at the scale of temporal mechanics. The game treats its cast with a respect that was somewhat unusual for its era. Characters are allowed to have complex motivations and ambiguous moralities. They grow and change rather than remaining static. They have relationships with each other that exist independent of the protagonist, friendships and tensions that would continue even if Crono were not present. The party feels like a group of individuals who came together for a common purpose, rather than a collection of mechanics and abilities that happen to have names and appearances. Crono himself is an interesting protagonist, because he is simultaneously characterized and blank. He never speaks, allowing players to project themselves onto him, but his actions and choices throughout the story reveal a consistent personality. He is brave to the point of recklessness, willing to sacrifice himself without hesitation when he believes it will help others. He is kind and compassionate, befriending a princess without knowing her status and defending people who cannot defend themselves. He is loyal, maintaining friendships across eras and circumstances. The silence allows player projection, while the actions provide character, creating a protagonist who manages to be both empty vessel and fully realized person simultaneously. The Guru Trio represents different aspects of human achievement and understanding. Melchior embodies creation and the joy of making things, his blacksmithing a metaphor for all crafts and arts that transform raw materials into objects of use and beauty. Gaspar represents wisdom and perspective, the understanding that comes from being able to see the larger patterns and contexts that are invisible to those caught within the flow of time. Balthazar combines logic and creativity, bridging the gap between magic and technology, suggesting that these are not opposed forces but different approaches to manipulating reality that work best when integrated rather than treated as separate disciplines. Their separation across time by the Ocean Palace catastrophe scatters them through history, but also positions them perfectly to help the party from their different vantage points. Melchior in the present can forge weapons and provide equipment. Gaspar, at the end of time, can offer guidance and perspective on the temporal mechanics. Balthazar in the future can provide advanced technology and understanding of Lavos, based on his centuries of study. Together, they form a support network across all of time. Three wise men guiding heroes towards salvation, not through direct intervention, but through the tools and knowledge they provide. The mystic's role in the story complicates simple narratives about good and evil. They are not inherently evil, but rather a species whose civilization developed differently than humanity's. Their worship of magic and resentment toward humans stems from legitimate grievances and cultural differences, rather than pure malevolence. When Magius manipulates them into war, he is exploiting their existing tensions with humanity for his own purposes. using them as tools rather than allies. The fact that peace becomes possible after his influence is removed suggests that conflict between species is not inevitable, but rather the result of specific circumstances and bad actors, rather than fundamental incompatibility. Isla's strength and confidence, her absolute certainty in her own abilities and her tribe's potential, provides an interesting contrast to the more complex and conflicted characters from later eras. She represents humanity at its most primal and in some ways most honest, before civilization added layers of doubt and social complication. Her relationship with Kino, her romance with him, and their dynamic as equals who challenge each other to be stronger, shows healthy partnership based on mutual respect, rather than dominance or submission. She proves that being primitive does not mean being simple, that ancient humans possess the same capacity for intelligence, emotion, and heroism as their far future descendants. The extinction of the reptites and the survival of humanity following Lavos's impact raises uncomfortable questions about progress and worthiness. By any objective measure, the reptites were the superior species at that moment in history. They had better technology, more organized society, greater intelligence by most metrics. Yet they died, and humanity survived largely through luck of positioning and greater adaptability to the sudden climate change. This suggests that superiority is contextual rather than absolute, that being more advanced does not guarantee survival when circumstances change dramatically. The weak can inherit the world not through merit, but through accident, and what matters then is what they do with that unearned opportunity. The game's art style, with character designs by Akira Toriyama of Dragon Ball fame, gives everything a distinctive visual identity that is both timeless and tied to its era. The characters are expressive and memorable, their designs conveying personality through color choices and body language. The environments range from lush forests to frozen wastelands to crystalline floating kingdoms, each realized with pixel art that maximizes the limited graphical capabilities of the Super Nintendo. Decades later, the visuals remain charming and effective, the limitations of the technology forcing creative solutions that often work better than more realistic approaches might have. The pacing of the story is carefully constructed to balance action and quiet moments, combat and exploration, linear progression and open-world freedom. The first act is relatively structured, introducing mechanics and characters through a series of escalating challenges. The middle section opens up considerably, allowing players to tackle objectives in various orders and pursue side quests at their own pace. The final act narrows focus again, bringing all threads together for the climactic confrontation with Lavos. This structure prevents the story from becoming monotonous, while also ensuring players are never completely lost or overwhelmed by options. Combat in Chrono Trigger uses a system called active time battle, where characters and enemies take turns based on a constantly filling gauge rather than strict turn-based rules. This creates tension and urgency, forcing players to make decisions quickly rather than taking unlimited time to plan every action. The system also encourages experimentation with different party compositions and strategies, as different characters have different timing and abilities that work better in various situations. Combined with the dual and triple tech system, where characters can combine their abilities for more powerful effects, combat becomes a puzzle to be solved through understanding mechanics and synergies. The dual and triple techs serve both mechanical and narrative purposes. Mechanically, they reward players for experimenting with different party combinations and learning how abilities interact. Narratively, they represent the growing bonds between party members, the way working together creates possibilities that individual effort can achieve. When Crono, Marle and Lucca execute a triple tech, it is not just three separate attacks happening simultaneously, but rather a unified assault that is greater than the sum of its parts, a physical manifestation of their teamwork and trust. The decision to allow players to keep their experience and equipment when starting a New Game Plus run creates interesting possibilities for experiencing the story differently. Playing through with endgame power from the beginning transforms the challenges and allows for encounters with Lavos at unusual points in the narrative, unlocking those alternative endings. It also rewards completion by allowing players to experience the story again without having to grind through combat that is no longer challenging, focusing instead on narrative and exploration. This respect for player time and desire for variety was somewhat unusual in the era and remains a thoughtful design choice. The legacy of Chrono Trigger extends far beyond its original release in 1995. The game influenced countless subsequent RPGs, establishing mechanical and narrative conventions that would become genre standards. Its approach to time travel storytelling showed that complex narratives with multiple timelines and branching possibilities could work in game format. Its characterization proved that silent protagonists could coexist with strong characterization for other party members. Its music demonstrated how important soundtrack is to emotional impact and remains celebrated and remixed decades later. Yet for all its influence and acclaim, Chrono Trigger remains in some ways a standalone achievement. The sequel, Chrono Cross, tells a different story with different characters and a different approach, connected to the original, but not a direct continuation. This means the story of Chrono Trigger has a completeness and self-contained quality that many game series lack. The narrative reaches a definitive conclusion, the main questions are answered, and while some mysteries remain, they feel intentional rather than the result of rushing or incompleteness. The story told is the story intended, and it stands on its own without requiring sequels or expansions to justify itself. The themes of friendship and cooperation over individual heroics permeate every aspect of the story. Crono is the protagonist, but he cannot succeed alone. Every major challenge requires the party working together, combining their abilities and supporting each other. Even the resurrection quest is accomplished through coordinated effort across multiple eras and disciplines. The game consistently rewards cooperation and punishes lone wolf approaches, reinforcing through mechanics the narrative message that we are stronger together than apart. The environmental storytelling throughout the game adds depth that dialogue and text cannot fully capture. Seeing the forest change from Ayla's era through the Middle Ages to the present and then burned in the future tells a story about ecological destruction and resilience without needing explicit explanation. The transformation of locations across eras, the way buildings rise and fall, the way rivers change course and coastlines shift, all of this creates a sense of time's passage that is visceral rather than abstract. Players do not just read about history, they walk through it, experiencing the weight of ages in a way that text-based narratives struggle to achieve. The game also does not shy away from showing consequences of failure and tragedy. The future they first encounter is genuinely horrifying. A world where billions died in agony and the survivors cling to existence without real hope. The fall of Zeal kills thousands and wipes out the most advanced civilization humanity has ever achieved. Queen Lene's kidnapping, if not resolved, erases Marle from existence. These are not sanitized or softened tragedies, but real losses with weight and permanence, making the victories more meaningful because the stakes are genuinely high. The redemption of Magus, if it can be called that, is handled with appropriate complexity. He is not forgiven for his crimes or absolved of responsibility. The people he hurt and the damage he caused remain real and unhealed. But he is allowed to participate in preventing greater catastrophe, not because he deserves redemption, but because the mission is too important to reject useful allies over moral purity. This pragmatic approach to justice acknowledges that the world is complicated, that people can be simultaneously guilty of terrible acts and capable of contributing to good outcomes, and that sometimes preventing apocalypse requires working with those we might prefer to punish. The time gates themselves, those shimmering portals that allow travel between eras, are never fully explained in scientific or magical terms. They are presented as phenomena rather than technology, things that exist because of Lavos's influence, but not necessarily things anyone fully understands or controls. This ambiguity keeps time travel feeling mysterious and wondrous rather than reducing it to mere transportation. Each gate passage is a journey into the unknown, even when the destination has been visited before, because time itself is not something humans were meant to navigate freely. Sharla's fate remains one of the story's great unresolved mysteries within Chrono Trigger itself, deliberately left open rather than tied up neatly. She was absorbed into the temporal distortion when the Ocean Palace collapsed, but what that means, where she ended up, whether she survived in any meaningful sense. The game provides hints but no definitive answer within its own narrative. This uncertainty drives Magus's continued search and leaves players with questions to ponder long after the credits roll. It suggests that even after saving the world, even after preventing the apocalypse, there are still losses that cannot be recovered, people who cannot be saved, tragedies that persist despite our best efforts. The sequel, Chrono Cross, would later explore her fate more directly, but within Trigger's story, her disappearance remains an open wound that cannot be healed. The relationship between humanity and technology throughout the different eras shows varying approaches to advancement. The prehistoric era has no technology in the conventional sense, relying on natural strength and basic tools. Zeal has incredibly advanced magitech, but it is fragile, dependent on stolen power, and ultimately destroyed by its own hubris. The Middle Ages represents medieval technology, sufficient for survival but limited in capability. The present has modern conveniences without the excesses of zeal, and the future shows technology perverted by catastrophe, machines that continue functioning long after their creators died. The implication seems to be that technology itself is neutral, useful when applied with wisdom, but dangerous when pursued without consideration for consequences. The day-night cycle and weather effects, while simple by modern standards, add atmosphere and a sense of realism to the world. Seeing the town of Truce in sunlight during the festival versus rain-soaked and quiet at night creates different moods and emphasizes that this world exists beyond the player's direct interaction with it. The world has its own rhythms and patterns that continue regardless of the hero's presence, making it feel more authentic and lived in than static game environments. The prison sequence in the present, where Crono is tried and convicted for kidnapping Marle, serves multiple purposes narratively. It demonstrates that actions have consequences even when intentions are good. It shows that justice systems can be corrupted and manipulated by those in power. It forces Marle to choose between comfortable obedience and doing what she knows is right. And it provides urgency that drives them toward the future and their discovery of Lavos's threat, ensuring the story maintains momentum while also developing character relationships and conflicts. The way different eras influence each other through the party's actions creates a sense of agency and impact that many games struggle to achieve. Helping Fiona plant the forest in 600 changes the geography in 1000, creating a tangible, visible result of their efforts. Defeating Magus in the Middle Ages alters political dynamics that ripple forward through time. Actions in Zeal affect the present through complicated chains of cause and effect. This interconnectedness makes the world feel coherent and responsive, where choices matter and have lasting consequences beyond the immediate moment. The Mammon machine itself is a fascinating piece of fictional technology, a device that bridges magic and science, drawing on cosmic power through technological means. It represents humanity's eternal temptation to reach beyond current capabilities, to grasp at powers we do not fully understand, because the potential benefits seem to justify the risks. Queen Zeal's descent into madness through prolonged exposure to the machine demonstrates that some powers corrupt those who wield them, that there are energies humans may not be equipped to channel directly, because our psychology cannot handle that level of influence. Whether the corruption is inherent to Lavos's energy, or simply the result of unlimited power warping perspective, remains an open question, but the result is undeniable. The machine becomes a symbol for dangerous ambition, for the Faustian bargain of power at the cost of humanity. The concept of the entity, an intelligent force that might be guiding events, or at least has awareness of the time travelers, is hinted at, but never fully explored within the game itself. Some dialogues and environmental clues suggest there could be something beyond mere chance orchestrating their meeting and journey, some consciousness that wants Lavos destroyed and is subtly influencing events toward that outcome. Whether this entity represents the planet itself achieving some form of awareness, a higher dimensional being, or something else entirely, remains deliberately unclear and open to interpretation. This ambiguity adds a layer of mythic quality to the story, suggesting forces beyond complete understanding while not reducing the hero's agency or the significance of their accomplishments. The emotional climax of the story is not the final battle with Lavos, but rather the moments of connection and growth between characters throughout the journey. Lucca saving her mother, Frog accepting himself, Robo finding purpose beyond programming. These personal victories matter as much as the world-saving heroics, perhaps more, because they demonstrate that the point of preventing apocalypse is protecting the capacity for these small, important moments of love and growth and becoming. Saving the world is abstract. Saving your mother, accepting yourself, finding purpose. These are concrete and deeply human, making the larger quest meaningful by grounding it in relatable personal stakes. The final campfire scene before the last battle, where party members share their thoughts and feelings, provides catharsis and closure for character arcs, even before the mechanical conclusion of defeating Lavos. It acknowledges that whatever happens next, this journey has changed all of them, given them connections and experiences that will define the rest of their lives. They entered this quest as strangers thrown together by circumstance and accident, and they approach the final confrontation as family, bound by shared trauma and triumph into something that transcends mere friendship. The game's title itself, Chrono Trigger, refers both to the device used to resurrect Crono and to the broader concept of triggering change across time, of being the catalyst that alters history's course. Every major event in the story is a trigger in this sense, a moment where actions create ripples that expand through the centuries. The teleporter accident triggers Marle's displacement into the past. The Ocean Palace catastrophe triggers Zeal's fall and scatters the gurus through time. Crono's sacrifice triggers the party's desperate quest to resurrect him. And ultimately, Lavos' destruction triggers a complete rewriting of the future, preventing the apocalypse and allowing civilization to continue developing along different paths. The various weapons and equipment the party accumulates throughout their journey each tell small stories about the eras they come from and the people who crafted them. The Masamun's legendary status reflects the Middle Ages' reverence for heroic warriors and magical artifacts. The equipment from Zeal demonstrates their sophisticated understanding of magic and its applications. Robo's armaments come from a future that achieved technological marvels before being destroyed by forces they could not control. Even simple items carry weight and history, connecting the party to the broader world they are trying to save. The way the game handles death and resurrection is surprisingly mature and philosophically interesting. When Crono dies, it is treated as a genuine tragedy with real consequences, not a temporary setback to be casually reversed. The resurrection is not a simple spell or quick fix, but rather an elaborate quest requiring rare artifacts, perfect timing, and assistance from multiple eras. This gives weight to death while also suggesting that with sufficient determination and cooperation, even the seemingly permanent can sometimes be undone. It is a hopeful message that does not trivialize loss, but also refuses to accept loss as always final. The politics of the various eras, while not the primary focus, add texture and realism to the world. Guardia Kingdom's internal conflicts between throne and nobility, the tensions between humans and mystics, the complex relationship between Zeal's enlightened and earthbound, all of these political dynamics make the world feel like a place where people have conflicting interests and competing visions, rather than a simple backdrop for hero adventures. The fact that the party mostly operates outside these political structures, as independent agents pursuing their own mission, allows them to navigate conflicts without being captured by any single faction's agenda. The concept of the Day of Lavos, a specific date when the apocalypse occurs, creates a ticking clock that adds urgency to the entire narrative, even though that day is centuries beyond the present era. Knowing exactly when disaster will strike, being able to point to a calendar date and say that is when everything ends, makes the threat concrete rather than abstract. It transforms preventing the apocalypse from a vague aspiration into a specific achievable goal, with clear parameters for success or failure. Either Lavos emerges on that day, or it does not, and the party's actions will determine which outcome occurs. The various supporting characters encountered throughout the different eras, from minor NPCs to more significant figures like Chancellor in the present era, or the various monsters and creatures that populate different time periods, create a sense of a living world with depth beyond the main cast. These characters have their own lives, concerns, and stories that intersect briefly with the party's quest. Their existence reminds players that the heroes are not the only people who matter, that the world they are fighting to save is full of individuals with their own dreams and fears who will never know how close they came to extinction. The fairy tale quality of some story elements, like the cursed frog knight and the princess from a floating kingdom, exists alongside harder science fiction concepts like time travel mechanics and post-apocalyptic survival, creating a blend of genres that should clash, but instead complement each other. This willingness to mix tones and styles, to go from prehistoric adventure to magical kingdoms to dystopian future without losing narrative cohesion, demonstrates remarkable storytelling flexibility. The game refuses to be constrained by a single genre, instead taking what works from multiple traditions and synthesizing them into something unique. The economic system in the game, where finding treasure and selling loot provides currency for equipment upgrades, might seem like a standard game mechanic, but also ties into the narrative themes about different eras and their values. What is valuable varies dramatically across time periods, and the fact that the party can convert items from one era into currency usable in another suggests a deeper economic principle about value being contextual and malleable. The treasures of Zeal have different worth than medieval artifacts or prehistoric crafts, but all can be converted into tools for the journey. All serve the ultimate purpose of preparing the party for their confrontation with Lavos. The animation and sprite work, particularly during dual and triple techs, demonstrates remarkable creativity working within technical limitations. Each character has distinctive poses and movements that convey personality through pixels and limited frames. The way Crono swings his sword versus how Frog slashes with the Masamune. The differences in how magic users cast spells. The individual idle animations that play when characters are not actively engaged. All of these details accumulate into characters who feel distinct and memorable despite the relatively simple graphics. The decision to have Lavos be beatable at almost any point in the game after gaining access to the time travel gates creates an interesting relationship between player skill and narrative. The story assumes players will progress through the normal sequence, gathering power and allies before the final confrontation. But by allowing skilled players to challenge Lavos early, the game acknowledges that story progression and character development are not the only paths to victory. Sometimes determination and mastery of mechanics matter more than following the intended path, and the game rewards that with unique endings that celebrate the accomplishment of achieving what should be impossible. The way memories and the past haunt characters throughout the story emphasizes how much of who we are comes from what we have experienced. Lucca's memories of her mother's accident drive her scientific pursuits. Frog is trapped by memories of Cyrus's death and his own failure. Margus seeks his lost sister based on childhood memories of Zeal before its fall. Marle's memories of feeling constrained by royal expectations motivate her actions. Even Robo, whose memories are technically data rather than organic recall, is shaped by remembering the world before the apocalypse and his deactivated sibling's sacrifice. The game suggests that our relationship with the past determines how we approach the present and future. That memory is not merely record-keeping, but fundamental to identity and motivation. The game's approach to morality is nuanced rather than simplistic. There are no purely evil characters. Even Queen Zeal is more tragic than malicious, corrupted by forces she did not fully understand, rather than choosing wickedness for its own sake. The mystics are not evil. They are an opposing civilization with legitimate grievances. Even Lavos is not evil in any moral sense, merely following biological programming toward reproduction regardless of the destruction that causes. The game presents conflicts that arise from different perspectives, goals, and circumstances rather than absolute good versus absolute evil, making the moral landscape more interesting and realistic than many RPG narratives of its era. The recurring motif of sacrifice throughout the story, from Crono's death at the Ocean Palace to countless NPCs who gave up something important for the greater good, emphasizes that meaningful change requires cost. Nothing is achieved without risk and loss, and the party's ultimate victory comes not through clever tricks or overwhelming power, but through willingness to put themselves in danger repeatedly for the sake of others. This stands in contrast to power fantasies, where heroes succeed through superior ability alone. Here, success requires sacrifice, cooperation, and the acceptance of genuine risk, including potential permanent consequences. The underwater sequences and other environmental variations demonstrate technical achievement in presenting diverse gameplay scenarios within the same basic engine and interface. The game maintains consistent mechanics while changing context dramatically, from forest to mountains to underwater depths, to volcanic interiors to floating islands. This variety prevents monotony and showcases different aspects of the world's geography and history. Each environment tells part of the larger story about how the world developed and changed across the millennia. The role of the various shops and merchants in different eras, offering era-appropriate equipment and items, creates another layer of world building. Medieval merchants sell swords and armor. The present era offers more sophisticated tools. Zeal's merchants provide magically enhanced equipment, and the prehistoric era lacks formal commerce entirely. These details reinforce the differences between eras while also providing practical progression mechanics. The game integrates its systems with its setting in ways that feel natural rather than arbitrary. The hidden areas and secrets scattered throughout the various time periods reward exploration and curiosity, providing both mechanical benefits and narrative depth. Finding optional dungeons reveals more about each era's history and challenges. Secret techniques and equipment encourage players to thoroughly explore rather than rushing through the main path. These secrets suggest that there is always more to discover, that the world extends beyond what is necessary to complete the central quest, that curiosity and thoroughness yield rewards beyond what the minimum viable path provides. The way the game handles its supporting cast of shopkeepers, inn proprietors, random townsfolk, and other minor NPCs gives them just enough personality and individual detail to feel like people rather than merely functional interfaces. Brief dialogues reveal concerns, hopes, and perspectives that make each era feel populated by individuals rather than generic NPCs. This attention to detail in even minor interactions demonstrates respect for the world and its inhabitants, treating everyone as potentially interesting rather than just the main cast and major antagonists. The ending sequence, with its various possible conclusions depending on when and how Lavos is defeated, celebrates player agency while also providing narrative closure. Each ending feels earned based on the specific path taken to reach it, acknowledging that there are multiple valid ways to experience the story. The standard ending provides satisfying conclusion to all major character arcs and questions, while alternative endings offer different perspectives and reward creative approaches to the challenge. This flexibility respects player choice while maintaining narrative coherence, a balance that many games struggle to achieve. The legacy sequence showing the party's return to their respective eras, the implications that life continues beyond the credits, provides a sense of ongoing history rather than treating the story's conclusion as the end of everything. The world will continue, people will live their lives, new challenges and joys will emerge. The party saved the future from apocalypse, but they did not freeze time or create paradise. They simply ensured that history could continue unfolding, that people would have the opportunity to face whatever challenges emerge without the shadow of Lavos hanging over everything. It is a modest victory in its scope, preventing catastrophe rather than creating utopia. But that modest goal is presented as sufficient and worthy. If you found this journey through time meaningful, if these hours spent exploring 13,000 years of history and lore resonated with you, consider leaving a like to help others discover this story. Comments are welcome, sharing your own experiences with Chrono Trigger, or thoughts about time travel and destiny, and the bonds that connect us across the ages. And if you want more deep explorations of gaming's forgotten corners and legendary tales, consider subscribing. But mostly, thank you for traveling through time with me, for witnessing this story of friendship and sacrifice, of apocalypse prevented and futures rewritten. Until the next tale, may your own timeline unfold with courage and hope.